They said that.
That's the reminder to put your speaker on mute.
To my background.
There we go.
Let's see if my company won. Oh, no, good.
Oh, nope.
Couldn't remember how I'd set it up.
Recording in progress.
I'm
If
getting
you're
there,
ready.
I'm getting there.
Anybody knows
okay.
where we're recording the meeting this evening?
So long.
Speakers down to 0. Okay. Thank you, Frank, for promoting me. I feel so important now.
I got such a head start. You're already up, and I'm still just trying to get the thing going.
Oh, you want me to run your technology for you?
I don't know. Seemed like I was, okay, there I am. That's good, that's a start.
Eileen, how are you feeling?
Hmm?
How are you feeling?
It's okay. My knee's definitely just,
Good.
I saw my surgeon this morning, and he's like, it's still got so much
Just let
fluid
me know
in
when
it.
you're set to go.
I'm good to
But
go.
it's- I mean, I
Okay.
can get around, thank
Mike, we
goodness.
good?
Just-
Okay, we're opening our meeting then. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Oh, yeah.
This is the Select Board meeting for Tuesday, November 28th, at our new time, 6 PM. Sorry to be late. We ran over a little bit in our executive session that we had before this meeting. I see those people on TV doing that, adjusting the microphone to the right level for them, for we shorter people. We always remind you, as you were hearing, that the meeting is being recorded, and we always start by taking a moment of appreciation for our troops serving around the globe. Thank you. We have an appointment with Representative Denise Garlick, and I don't think she's here.
She is here.
Oh, she is
She's
here.
hiding behind.
She's hiding behind the pillar. Representative Garlick, thank you so much for coming. House Chair, Joint Committee on Education, to provide legislative and state budget update. We have a state budget, do we? Good.
We're actually blowing through the state budget.
Thanks for
So-
doing it for us.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to thank you for this opportunity to speak. I actually requested this time, and you have been so gracious to give it to me. I wanted to do that because I feel like I am working for you. I wanted to give you an update on the work, and I particularly wanted to see if there are questions moving forward as we begin to start to build budgets, both the governor's budget due in January, the House budget due in April. And so, with Christine's help, I was just going to very quickly go through the present budget that we have, which is the next slide, Christine. And I've just highlighted the things that I believe are very important to the town of Medfield from my work here and working with many people who are engaged on these initiatives. Certainly around clean energy and your very active resident committees that are working on clean energy. And I actually have had a chance to share with as many people who will listen to me that they should be speaking to Medfield about PFAS and the tremendous work you all have done on that. The mental health issue, as you know, has been vitally important to our schools and to our entire community. And you'll see that the state had, in this current budget I'm talking about now, more than $1.13 billion for children's mental health, for adult support services, and for loan forgiveness for providers. That's a whole issue we might want to discuss around the workforce, is we have, in so many sectors, but particularly in health and human services, really lost our workforce, and we need to rebuild. One of those tools is if we can do loan forgiveness for people who stay in Massachusetts and work in the field, it seems to be helpful. Public education, this is $6.559 billion for Chapter 70. You may know that this was the strongest education budget that the Commonwealth has ever released. This year that we're in, this $6.96 billion, which also had, we're in year 3 of full funding of the Student Opportunity Act. That's something we probably want to talk about. Student Opportunity Act, the most needy, very deserving communities. But only 20 communities in the Commonwealth benefited from what sounded like this incredible largesse. And those were the gateway communities. Early education and childcare, I want to speak to you more about this and the $1.5 billion to stabilize. What happened during COVID is the federal government poured money into the Commonwealth and into every other state in the nation to support early education and childcare. And the thought was that we needed to sustain that sector so when everybody rushed back to work, all these early education and childcare centers would be up and running. What we found was, A, we know that people didn't rush back to work, but what we do know is when people were ready to return to work, there was one of the biggest obstacles was around early education and childcare. And it was the first time in my experience and in many people's experience that we began to see early education and childcare as an economic driver. The business community has been one of the clearest, loudest voices on the importance of early education and childcare to be able to provide for our children while workers return to the workforce. And on public health, $965.4 million for programs like early intervention, for regional public health, and I want to talk to you a little bit more about a bill that I have sponsored and we are on track to vote unanimously on again. The policy initiatives for this budget, on the next slide, Christine, were around preventative services, Operation House Call, universal school meals. The Commonwealth spent $6.5 billion for Chapter 70. And here, I've repeated this thing here. You know we're doing universal school meals for both breakfast and lunch right across the Commonwealth. This was another initiative that came through COVID where the federal government was paying for food for breakfast and lunch for students certainly in the period of time that they were out of school and now when they've returned to school. When the president lifted the COVID emergency measures, all that money went away, just like the early education and child care money went away. And Massachusetts stepped up, and we are spending this money now, and we have continued this universal school meal program. And we are seeing tremendous benefits from it that are both tangible and intangible. You know, one of the tangible benefits is we're seeing what everyone had hoped for was a stronger, healthier student body. We all know children that are hungry can't learn. We all know that children that are sick can't learn. But informally, I've traveled across the Commonwealth wearing a different hat, and we're also seeing that many children who are eating the same meals together are eating better, are eating more of their meals, and certainly being exposed to more and different foods. In this budget, the FY24 budget, which ends on June 30th of 2025, okay, so we're midway through, is the eviction protection money and for no-cost calls for people that are incarcerated. The next slide is the FY24 budget that particularly pertains to Medfield. The local aid money, I just always want us to see, continues to climb. It's incremental. It's not as much as Medfield needs, but it continues to climb. The Chapter 70 money you'll see is also noted there, and the Special Education Circuit Breaker. Special Education Circuit Breaker was fully funded at the 75%, and you see that statewide we see the money, and Medfield, the initial money that we're aware of, was over $1 million, and that's a formula, actually, that is a reimbursement for students for whom their special education needs are more costly than can be met with our regular formula. But the school system needs to put that money up front and then they get reimbursed for it. It's something that I think is a concern. And I wear that concern as the Education Committee Chair. I am now this chair. I think it is incredibly meaningful. On the next slide, Christine, incredibly meaningful to the people that I represent in all three towns, both Medfield, Dover, and Needham. Resident surveys put education as one of the very top values in our communities. I put up all of these issues so that you can see how broad the responsibility is here to consider all of these issues. Certainly 334 bills before the committee, 14 hearings, many of which last 5 or 6 hours in a public hearing, and all of which I do in a hybrid model. And we do this with American Sign Language interpreters primarily, and COT services is when somebody's speaking, you actually put their phrasing up on the board so that people in the room who may have some hearing deficiencies can be able to read what is happening on the board. People at home watching on their computer can see exactly what's happening. Every hearing has a full transcript, and anyone can request those transcripts to see that. I would like you to know that I believe I come to that committee chairmanship with a great sensitivity for people with disabilities. I'm also the elected chair of a permanent funded commission on the status of individuals with disabilities. And in my world, commissions carry different meanings. Sometimes it's meaningful work that you're going to get a product out of. Sometimes it's a way to sidestep an issue, quite frankly. The two words that matter is permanent, right? Gives us time to actually do our work, and funded, right? Almost no commissions are funded. And this funding has made a major difference in the work that we're doing. It's 21 commissioners appointed by a variety of state office holders. And our focus this past year was on the workforce, both the workforce that serves people with disabilities, and importantly, the number of people with disabilities who want to be in the workforce. Now, not everyone with a disability wants to be in the workforce or can be in the workforce. But if we looked at a pool of people, 100%, let's say this was 100% of the people who can and want to do this, only 38% of those people are working. Only 38%, which is a tremendous loss to the Commonwealth. It has so many jobs that are unfilled, and such a dedicated, earnest, capable workforce that we're not exercising. The budget initiatives in this present budget, on the next slide, Christine, are around the very things I talked about, the school meals, the Green School Works, which is $50 million about how to help schools in piecemeal. This isn't one school project, but if a school is trying to do something around clean energy and greening the actual school, there are grant programs for that. Early education and childcare is $1.5 billion. That was money that we had from the feds. We got lifted the emergency. We no longer had from the feds, and Massachusetts put that money up, $1.5 billion. Early college, the special ed circuit breaker. And consistent with the universal meals, there's also a study program around school nutrition. In a very small, on the next slide, Christine, in a very small contribution, but one very meaningful to me when I visited the Medfield food cupboard, was $10,000 targeted just to the Medfield food cupboard in the budget. And you may know that there was also money in the budget for the Hinckley Park and some of those other issues that I worked with my colleagues on, but can't take credit because I wasn't the leader on those other things. The session priorities that are on the next slide that you may be interested in certainly concern public health, the hybrid public meetings. You'll see there issues around housing. We did a tax relief bill. Transportation ever present on everyone's mind, and the human services workforce. And I want to just talk to you a little bit about public health and the hybrid public meetings particularly. The public health initiative is something that I have worked on since 2014. I got elected in 2010, first started serving in 2011. And we seated a commission on public health because in our Commonwealth, there's 351 cities and towns. The quality of public health varies right across the Commonwealth. It's not even predictable by geographic area. The town of Needham has a full staff. It has a public health director. It has administrative staff. The town of Dover has a volunteer board. That's it, right? So that's two contiguous towns, and two towns in kind of the same kind of very affluent district, right? So you can imagine as we start to look at the big city areas, or we get out to the Western Mass area, that there is a real variation in that. The commission was chaired by the Commissioner of Public Health, came up with recommendations, and those recommendations became what was called the first SAFE bill, and it's SAPHE, which is the state plan for public health excellence. And that bill was very consistent with the recommendations, but was very suggestive. We should be doing this, we could be doing this, we might want to be doing this, right? And actually it came out of the House unanimously 2 weeks before the COVID emergency was declared. So the bill wasn't written to deal with the COVID emergency, but it was timely because of the COVID emergency, right? We fast forward to the next session, and it's like, suggestions really weren't enough. Now we've learned so much during the pandemic, what we need, what really public health looks like, how we can increase the standards, how we can make sure that the public health personnel are more qualified for the positions, how we give towns and regions the resources they need, and importantly, how we can lower the barriers so that cities and towns that want to work together can do it much more fluidly, like our fire department does, like our police departments do with memorandums of understanding. We could make it much more fluid and make sure that the cities and towns are playing to their very best hand and sharing those resources and shoring up what they need help with. The second session priority there is the hybrid public meeting, and that is the remote and in-person meetings. And I am the chief sponsor of that bill as well. And at the state level, we've seen that it has made a tremendous difference in the residents of the Commonwealth feeling like they are participating in the democratic processes, that their voices are being heard, that they are aware of what's going on. And I am very hopeful that we'll see a version of that bill come forward. And the healthcare worker safety bill is the workplace violence bill that, while we don't like to think about this, but healthcare facilities are very volatile environments. And there's a great deal of violence that happens in those buildings to the people who work in those buildings. And our ability to say, listen, we have to have a plan that you know what the workplace violence prevention plan is, who's responsible for it, who's accountable for it, and how we're going to enforce it. And it shouldn't be this hard to pass this bill, but it seems to be. On early education and care, as the chair of education, this is a major charge that I have. We've done a lot of work on that in the budget, but more than that, I've traveled all over the Commonwealth. I've traveled to every member of the education committee's district, except for two, to everyone that I was invited, from Pittsfield to Acton to Lowell to Haverhill and to Boston, and really trying to better understand early education and childcare and how we can move forward and what it means to families. And for anyone who is not familiar with this, the average cost for early education and childcare full-time in the Commonwealth is somewhere between $21,000 and $27,000 a year, right? And that's for one child. And oftentimes families have more than one little one in that age group. So it's an overwhelming cost, but it's a necessary cost if we're going to have people in the workforce and if we also value early education. And the way that I'm looking at it with my committee is around access. Who can get into these programs? What does that look like? We have classrooms all over the Commonwealth that have seats. That's what we call them, seat spaces, right? Spaces for little ones that are closed because there is no workforce. So the access is not only, do you have a program near you, but is there somebody actually in that program who is staffing that? It's around affordability, which is a major, major issue, and it's around quality of education. And I'm a strong proponent, if we're going to spend taxpayer money on early education and childcare, we need to be able to assure the taxpayers that these are quality programs that are taking place. And I can answer any of those questions on those other issues that are listed there. And then I do have a little commercial on the next one, if anyone wants the garlic press. We have many, many people that are subscribing to this. And if anyone's familiar with it, I hope you know that the Garlic Press, from time to time, I put in a statement about something that we're working on. The thing that is capturing people's imagination and why they're signing up for it is I put into it the events that are happening in Needham, the events that are happening in Medfield, the events that are happening in Dover. And I get stopped all the time by people who say, I read that Garlic Press because, I went to that thing in Medfield. Or they'll say, I saw that Dover was doing something. I think Medfield should do that. I'm going to talk to them. And I really feel like it builds community. And then I do, as your state representative, put in the legislative updates where we are and what we're working on, and if I voted on a bill and what that is. But with that, I truly wanted to thank you for your time and mostly answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much for coming, Denise. We
Thank you.
really appreciate it. We'll start with Mr. Murby. Any questions or comments, or?
I'll make a comment. This has been an issue that's concerned, and this is not a comment, I'm not attacking you on this one at all. I'm actually.
I'll be the judge of that.
Well, I know you can, no, but my.
Although it sounds like it does.
No, the reason is because it could sound like that because of what I'm bringing up.
Sure.
If I go back, it was, I think, 3 or 4 years ago when you came and did the State of the Town
Right.
address at the Public Safety Building. After the address, there was a group of us talking. At the time, I think you were Vice Chair of the House Ways and Means Committee. You were commenting about the Chapter 70 education funds. Now, those big numbers look like big numbers, but you'd made the observation at the time, and I think anybody that looks at our budget understands that the Chapter 70 funds, although they go up every year, in a town like ours, they've been going up at a very slow rate. It's almost like they've been going up at the rate that you kind of have to allow them to go up so that people don't really notice that everybody, other towns are going up faster. And the concern I have, when I said I wasn't attacking you, I don't blame you for that.
Okay.
I'm actually just looking for if there's any update on the perspective. At the time, you said, when I try to make the case to my colleagues that even towns like Medfield need that kind of help, their answer is, hey, wait a minute, I've got this problem and this problem and this problem. I don't want to hear about Medfield. That's
Right.
not your fault. That's just the general prevailing attitude. And I partly understand it. But the one thing that is being a member of the select board that I look at is, on one hand, first off, I don't think Medfield, when I moved here 28 years ago, was exactly the affluent town that it sort of has become. So we didn't used to be that. We used to actually be a pretty well-balanced town. We spent money effectively, but we didn't have a whole lot extra money to deal with. And there's a certain attractiveness to a town that has a sort of pragmatic and that would like to be able to do more things than they can, but has made that hard decision around, what we can do, what we can't do, and we're sorry about what we can't do. But it's good for kids to learn that. It's good for people in the town to understand that. When the town faces some of the issues that we face, like with 40B, which basically, if you really think, and MBTA communities potentially as we move ahead, basically there's an effort in one sense by the state to look to diversify housing, to broaden the base, to diversify a town like ours, not just, demographically, but economically, which to a degree I see as almost a return to what we used to be at one time before we had as much affluence as maybe we do at the top end now. But in trying to wrestle with how to respond to those needs, which at one level I philosophically agree with, because I think it's a better town when it's like that, there's this other prevailing thing that says, oh, you're affluent, you don't need that money. And so what we wind up doing is being in a major crunch with the school department, with relative to the overall town budget, because if we're doing what we're doing on the housing, then the percentage of people who can just take it out of their back pocket should be going down. If we're doing what we should be doing on the housing, but what I see happening on the funding, particularly I'm thinking of Chapter 70 funding, is a continuation of the attitude that's, well, you're one of the most affluent communities in town, you can take it out of your back pocket. If you want to be a top school system, that's fine, but you need to pay for it. Don't really expect the state to be helping you. I'm not blaming you for that. actually wondering, is there any, are people connecting the dots? It says, well, if you want the town to do these things on the housing side, then we have to pull in our horns a little bit on the funding side if we really are trying to, if we really are trying to encourage excellence of education in the Commonwealth, and we don't want to necessarily centrally control it. If we have a town that knows what it's doing, we need to give them a little bit of rope to do it. Is there any shift in that philosophy that would give us cause to be optimistic?
So I'm going to peel that back a few ways. First thing I want to discuss the conversation we had after the rep report. And that, in fact, was a good recollection on your part of that conversation, because what I was saying is even for the money I try and get for the district, right? So certainly in other budgets, I have, more targeted Medfield, trying to get more resources here. But I do, in fact, sit across from the Chair of Ways and Means and say, I'm representing Needham, Dover, and Medfield, and we'd like to have $250,000 to do something, right? And I do get that sense that it's like this isn't a needy community. There's so many needy communities. And my response to that has always been, listen, I appreciate that. I'm not up to date on the most recent numbers, but when I actually sat down and did this, we are in the top 5 most affluent districts in the Commonwealth, right? So it's not, we're kind of affluent. We really are, right? So, but I always say, listen, I appreciate that. I said, but the people that I represent are the engine of the Commonwealth. And I said, particularly sitting in my office, the people coming in, the head of agencies, the head of nonprofits, the head of big businesses, the heads of banks, they live in Needham, Dover, and Medfield. And I said, we are the engine, and I need to be able to demonstrate to the people that I represent that we recognize that and respect that. So that's that part of the conversation. The Chapter 70 doesn't target Medfield. There's no one out there saying Medfield doesn't need that money. It's a formula, and it's a very Byzantine formula. And if we gave Jeff Marsden, 2 weeks to present to us, it would still be hard to get through that formula, because it was built on, in the legislative world, and this is probably something you'd like to do, Gus, is they never go back to zero, right? They just build on, and then they fill in, and then they build on another layer and everything. And then you get to a place where it's really hard to discern how things are going. But in our town, separate than these gateway cities that really benefit from the Student Opportunity Act, the formula is based on the property taxes, right? The problem in Medfield is that there's no commercial tax base. Right. The benefit in Needham is big commercial tax base that we actually do with a split tax rate, right? Natick, big commercial tax base, right? So Medfield has like no cushion. It's on the personal property taxes, and I don't know how to solve that, and I don't know how to fix that. I will tell you this, I am increasingly concerned that in the legislature, we have a very strong Boston delegation, right? There's 16 state reps from Boston, right? We have a very strong gateway delegation. There are 20 gateway cities and towns. They were the beneficiaries of the Student Opportunity Act. That's a lot of block votes, right? There's a rising rural coalition that's really beginning to talk about rural schools now and regional schools and what that's going to look like. Particularly because Western Mass is withering away in front of our eyes. But there isn't a suburban coalition. And there was at one time, years ago, when we first started talking about the senior circuit breaker was the work of the suburban coalition. But I'm really thinking that we need to get a more united voice about what's happening in the suburbs and what that means to us. So I do know that you're right about that, Gus, but there's always work to be done, but Medfield isn't targeted. Medfield is squeezed. Squeezed between
that's
these other
my point.
entities.
Yeah. In a weird sort of way, that then brings about the natural hollowing out of the town. It becomes self-fulfilling prophecy when you're affluent, and if you're not an executive, you can't afford to get here. But then the people I'm thinking about are the people who aren't that. The first group you always see is retirees. You hear from them, but the ones that actually I pay attention to are certain families who aren't at the top, who actually came here because they have basically made a financial sacrifice to get here because of the schools. That's actually the ones that I think about, and they just get caught in the middle of that.
And I think there's a misnomer too. I mean, these certainly are affluent communities, but the people I represent, by and large, they're not so wealthy, they never have to worry, right? And there's a difference there, right? So, and I try and make this case too, and I say to people, listen, I want you to know that I recognize that these are affluent communities. I said, but because they're affluent communities, our kids necessarily aren't getting free rides to college, and our parents are still needing to go into nursing homes with no benefit there, and it's all of their life savings and a lot of their children's life savings too. And I feel like it's the same way I talk about, Beth Israel Deaconess Needham is in my district, right? And I talk about that hospital, and I always say, it's not rich enough not to worry, and it's not poor enough to get help. You know, and if I had to choose my place, I'd want to be in that place, but it doesn't mean it's an easy place to be.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Eileen?
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
How's your knees feeling?
Excellent, actually. Look at this. Anybody who's wondering, I had two total knee replacements in a 6-month period. So I'm doing commercials for my surgeon. Yeah.
Well, so I'm just going to add a nugget to what Gus brought up, which is, there's all this pressure for the MBTA communities and all this housing. So I just love to put the nugget out there that if someone like a Medfield, like we're trying to move through this Medfield State Hospital project, which would put 334 apartments in affordable housing, if towns like Medfield do step up, then when they start to do that formula, I would like to see added dollars given back towards the education, right? Because now we're putting more bodies in the chair. And more importantly, if we act on it, I know for a fact that there are certain towns that are literally setting aside 50 acres that are actually paved parking lots worth of 50 acres. So are they really going to build? Are they really doing anything for the state or not? Yet here we are in Medfield trying to do something about housing. So those cities and towns that do step up, I'd like to see the education side of it be awarded. And if we are somewhat penalized because we are of the top 5, well, but we're also acting and trying to provide housing and affordable housing. So with that, let's give money back to education.
Right. So, and I know the town is engaged very much in the MBTA community conversation, right? And what it means. As you can imagine, I think about it a lot. Number one, the misnomer out there is affordable housing, right? Affordable housing in Medfield is going to be upwards of $500,000, right? By the time you look at the formula and what it is. We're not talking about deeply affordable housing for the poor. We're not talking about Tilden Village. We're not talking about that. We're talking about this formula on the median based on the income in the town and other factors, right? So, A, that's a high number. B, the number of houses in the formula are not going to be built immediately. The town is coming up with a zoning plan that says this could be possible, but it doesn't mean that a developer is actually going to take you up on it. Well, I would if I was a
But it's by
developer,
right, right? So that's a scary thing.
Right.
So when it's by right,
It's
there's
by
not
right.
a lot of teeth back on, so
Right.
you
But
can't do
it
it
still
willy-nilly.
doesn't happen overnight. There's no capacity in the Commonwealth's construction industry to build the kind of housing we're talking about, MBTA communities right across the Commonwealth. So I like to just lower the temperature on that just a little bit while still being realistic that this is a big lift the towns are being asked to do. I want you to know, I want you to know that I went to the mat with Secretary Keneally on this, right? Secretary Keneally was the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development. And I said to him, I don't understand this plan. I said, all you're trying to do is cram more housing into the same amount of space when Western Mass is dying. You're the Secretary of Economic Development. For God's sakes, get jobs out there. If they had jobs, they have space, and they'd build houses out there. And I did not win that argument. And I had also tried to the language, right, around, separate from the MBTA, around the housing thing, was that it has to be just a majority vote of town meeting. And I don't think they understood town meeting, to be very honest with you. I think Secretary Keneally should have, because he was from Lexington. But I said, I represent a town that has a representative town meeting. We elect these folks, they get materials, you can call them, you can have a discussion. I said, I represent 2 other towns that have an open town meeting. Anything can happen in an open town meeting. And I said, and yes, it can be packed by a neighborhood that doesn't want something. It can be backed by developers that do. And I'm disappointed, actually, in the housing plan, because that word affordable is misleading. And the kind of housing we need in Massachusetts, we need all kinds of housing, but we particularly need deeply affordable housing, you know, and that's what we all think that we're trying to accomplish, but I'm not sure we're going to see that. It's my opinion that the legislation was very, very helpful to developers, and not so much to the young families or older adults in the community that really need housing, so I'm worried about that. I will bring back the idea about what does that mean to education. You know, the formula, because it's a formula, the more students you have, the more money you'll get, but we know that money isn't enough that you're
Right.
getting from the state. But
That's good. Thank you for everything you do. Appreciate it. Good
Thank
seeing you.
My pleasure.
So first of all, I would just say thank you for what you do for us. And it's been a great pleasure to watch as you've been at the legislature, that your colleagues have recognized you and given you more responsibility. And so thank you for the good works that you're doing there. I would start by saying that from going to the MMA meetings, the Mass Municipal Association meetings, and listening to Jeff Beckworth for years, and his plea for revenue sharing with the state, I am struck by the fact that it seems to me that the legislature is making a decision to not fund cities and towns as much, and so that basically forces us to then pay for services through the property tax, and that a lot of services are getting pushed from the state funding down to the town funding, and that seems to be just a historic trend, and it would be great if that could get reversed. Hybrid meetings. I had to drive to Northampton today. I'd never been to Northampton. Beautiful 2-hour drive. 5-minute hearing with the judge. He insisted that we be there in person. And at the end of the 5 minutes, he said, "Is there anything else I can do for you?" And I almost said, "The next time we do this, let's do it on Zoom." I mean, the Zoom meetings have just changed municipal government dramatically. I hope the legislature will make those permanent, because they really help us a ton here on the municipal government level.
And people feel that, Pete. They really feel it.
Oh, I think
Yeah.
people participate way more than they ever did. I mean, when I became a selectman, I recognized early on that you just can't expect people to come out to evening meetings, and that's not the way that you're gonna get information to people.
It should be mandatory in some situations, because not all of the committees in towns actually, even elected committees, have Zoom meetings, and I think they should. I think that should,
I personally think it can be the antidote to toxic social media.
Yep.
You know, if you're just reading something, but you haven't heard it yourself firsthand, you haven't seen people's body posture, you haven't heard the inflection in their voice, things can be interpreted by somebody else. But if you have a chance to do it yourself, and I'm sure that the select board meetings, the school committee meetings, the housing meetings that you're having, people are watching. People are watching.
Yeah, well, they do, and I know that you guys have pushed the timing on that. You've given us more time on it, but you haven't made it permanent, so I'm hoping that
Right.
you guys will make it permanent. I'm
Although we
very-
do like it when people show up in person.
I was say, don't be fooled, we don't usually have this many people here.
You're obviously a big draw, Denise, so thank you for drawing the crowd for us. And then I was gonna just share that, you were talking about solutions for a town like Medfield that doesn't have a commercial tax base.
Right.
One of the solutions that I envision for a town like Medfield is that people want to live here. And there is housing that will add to our tax base, but not to our municipal costs. And I know that the issue of accessory dwelling units is before the legislature now as a mechanism. I think they're talking about making it as of right, I think. And I think that accessory dwelling units might be a sort of option for a place like Medfield. all of a sudden, everybody would have a building, the value of a building lot in their backyard to build maybe 1,000 square foot apartment or something for an in-law or for a rental, or all of a sudden that would create huge value for all the property owners in Medfield. And it would also add to our tax base without adding to our municipal costs, because we're not likely to get a lot of municipal costs out of 1,000 square foot home. So I just
want to share
encourage you to think about accessory dwelling units.
a personal note, Pete, that in my hometown of Needham, I was a strong proponent of accessory dwelling units because, as many people in the town know, I am the mother of 4 young adults. My second child was born with significant developmental disabilities. And as my husband and I are trying to plan for the years ahead, you know, she lives with us now. She has always lived with us. I'm like, how will we make that happen? And I believe in an accessory dwelling unit that, while Russell and I are still in the main house with Beth, we could have a caregiver that we traded room and board in that accessory dwelling unit for, that would be available for respite. You know, I have to,
Yeah.
every week I have to leave earlier on the Mass Pike. Forget this, nobody's on the roads, everybody's on the roads, right? To get into work on time. And, you know, if I have to leave at 6:30 or 7:10, how am I going to make that happen? If we had someone there that was trading respite, that would be helpful. And the other issue in our town, and Needham does have accessory dwelling units that we passed in town meeting. The other issue was, and the flip side of that is when Russell and I get older, we'll move into the dwelling unit and let Beth and Pierre and the staff move into the main house, right? But it was also a major issue in my town for older adults that were looking to stay in the town and
Yeah.
don't have, there's no
Yeah.
way that they can make that work, but if they had an accessory dwelling unit. So we built a lot of protections around that
Yeah.
and what that looks like. It's not,
We
as
don't
of
have
right
a
in
lot.
Needham, there's a lot of protections.
We don't
there.
have a lot of housing for older people that want to downsize in this town. And the accessory dwelling units would create that. And it would create it through the market. You wouldn't have to, the town wouldn't have to invest anything. It would change the, and I know that Gus is sensitive to this, because it would change the tenor of the town. Because, I mean, your neighbor might have a little 1,000 square foot house in their backyard, and, you know, you might not like that. But it would solve a bunch of problems. It would create a lot of wealth for our residents, and it would add to our tax base.
It took the town of Needham probably close to 5 years of lots of discussions and really building in what we thought would be a way we could have ADUs and preserve, you know, what we value in the town of Needham, you know, so. but it-
We get the same issues you do. We just seem to get them a little later because we're a little further out and we're not as dense as Needham is. But, yeah, I look to what you guys do to see what the solutions are.
Could I jump in?
Please,
There
yeah.
was just, let me just
Yeah.
finish up on, there was one more thing that I recently sent to Newton Thompson on our accessory, on our affordable housing trust. There was a really interesting program about a place on Cape Cod called Cape Villages. And it was the sort of thing that you would be very interested in for your daughter, where they created a community of these tiny little houses for people with disabilities. But it was just a charming looking place as they went around with their cameras, so.
Well, in every town I represent, there's a major housing project taking place, right? In Needham, it's the Needham Housing Authority project. In Medfield, it certainly is the State Hospital Property Project, right? And actually, I'm going to go back to Needham again. The Charles River Center, for which Medfield is the catchment area, right, for people with developmental disabilities, has purchased land now. And what they are hoping to do, which is had been another driver for the ADUs, was around individuals with autism who may be independent enough to live on their own, but with supports. And they're talking about building a community that will have some independent housing, some shared housing, some housing for staff, but have this complex where lots of people could be together.
And you build in
depending on
those
the
supported services so that the
That's right.
parent knows that after they die, that their child will be taken care of in a good environment, so.
That's
Yeah,
right.
it's a solution that we need,
That's right.
so.
And Pete, I just wanted to go back to the pressure on the town about property taxes. So it's a $56.6 billion budget, right? I mean, it's a lot of money in the state budget and a lot of different ways it's spent. But the way we get our money is income tax. So we have the same kind of pressure around raising income tax that you have around property tax, and we're all trying to work together.
So I'll just share with you very quickly, one of my great angers with the state, I live up next to the Medfield State Hospital, and when I got here, Medfield State Hospital was still operating. I noticed that the buildings were falling down, and I was very angry. I was on the board at Riverside Community Care at the
Oh,
time.
yes, yeah.
I was on their board for like 20, 25 years. And I got angry at DMH for not giving enough money to Medfield State Hospital to maintain the buildings. And then I realized, well, it's not, DMH wants the money. They'd like to have the buildings be pristine. So it's really the legislature that's not giving DMH the money. And then I thought about that. The next step is, well, and that's because the legislators know that the residents don't want to pay more taxes. So
Yeah.
we're the problem. So go ahead.
So I actually just wanted to follow up on the comment you made about the safeguards. The issue of accessory dwelling units, from the standpoint of giving people options to provide housing, in-law apartments / au pair apartments, my grandmother lived upstairs in my aunt and uncle's house when they converted the whole upstairs into her own apartment when she got older. And I think actually as a society, we would be better off if some of our elderly parents had more options that could be a little bit easier to manage than just having them literally living in your own living space. So that part I actually would like us to see make progress on. The sensitivity I have around the accessory dwelling units, it has to do with what I saw happen with multifamily housing then when condoization suddenly became legal. Suddenly we don't have enough affordable housing, which we used to have with multifamily housing, but people who had multifamily housing realized, well, it was easier to simply subdivide and sell off. You could get more money by selling off individual units. Same building, but that's gone. And I would see the danger of having two standalone units on 1 acre zone lot or 2 acre zone. Effectively what you've done is you've just cut the zoning more or less in half, except that you said that in Newton, I guess, that there were safeguards. And I'm just, Needham, there were safeguards.
Yeah.
And I was just curious what kind of,
So in
just
Needham,
a sense of what those things
We don't
would be.
have standalone buildings.
Okay,
We don't have
Okay.
standalone buildings. And then there was discussions around square footage, how much was square footage?
Okay.
And, the setback,
okay. So it would always go as a
when
single.
you're thinking about driving through the town of Medfield, what does that look like to you?
Mhm.
We're not, I would think that you don't want to lose that character, right? So
Right.
how could you have something, what's the setback, how big can it be? And in Needham too, there's language about who it's for,
Okay.
how we're going to do that. you
So
know.
with those things, I think Pete and I would probably be a lot closer in agreement than
You
he
could also
first said.
require at least one of the properties to be occupied by the owner of.
Needham does
Mhm,
that.
mhm.
Needham does that.
Okay,
Right.
thanks.
And we're not in the business of setting up Airbnbs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are then I think Pete and I are a lot closer than even I thought 5
See
minutes
that?
ago.
It's always good.
Thanks for bringing us
And
together.
if it's, and when we're really trying to figure something out, I'm always available for breakfast at Fresco.
So do you want to see if anybody here has questions for you, or?
Sure.
Anybody have questions for Representative Garlick? Mr. Sorrell, right next to you.
I
this
just
side.
saw a very, I saw a very energetic budget projections, and a lot of social services and things going forward. Is anybody up there, either formally, informally, whatever, looking at what's going on with, right now with the migrants, so that it's not gonna become a drain on the budget, so that other programs that you would otherwise be funding at higher amounts, it's gonna get drained off to fund that?
So I actually had a very long conversation about this today with the Commissioner of Education and my Senate co-chair and other staff members and the Commissioner's staff people. So one of the things that I like to remind people when we're talking about migrants in Massachusetts is that they're here legally, which that's something that isn't well-defined either, right? I think we trip over things when we don't really clarify what we're talking about. But these individuals are here legally in this country seeking asylum and have court dates and those kind of issues in place. The concern that I have around education, if I can talk about that, because I don't know enough of everything else, right? But around education is that these newcomers to the Commonwealth, particularly these children of varying ages, varying languages, some educational experience, some with no educational experience, and their needs around translators and assessments and certainly trauma-informed care, right? And what that looks like to us. And there's, now that Massachusetts has capped the number of migrants into the Commonwealth and has capped these shelters, the question is, what's next, right? Because folks are still coming, right? Does this mean that folks will decide not to come here? Will we consider, we're seeing 40 to 50 families a week coming into the Commonwealth, right? So there's a lot of planning around that. The part of the holdup in the supplemental budget right now that we're seeing is around trying to figure out that issue, right? And there's differing viewpoints on how to do that. While we're holding up that supplemental budget, we're also holding up the collective bargaining agreements for public sector workers, and we're holding up money that we had promised to the school systems to help with the needs of these students. I wish I could answer that question for you. What I do know is that I said to my husband, I have a monthly call with 2 women that I grew up with from first grade on. And one lives in Massachusetts, but the other lives in Wisconsin. And we were talking about this issue. And I said, it's not just Massachusetts that, right, these migrants are moving to. The whole world is, people are migrating all over the world because of the horrors that we're seeing in this world related to wars and what we're going to do. So I would like to believe that Massachusetts recognizes and meets the needs of the migrants in our Commonwealth, and that we have strategies. When I talk about the Health and Human Services workforce, it is decimated. When I talk to you about public health, right, it is decimated. That workforce hasn't come back. Early educators haven't come back. Teachers haven't come back. Our needs are so great, and what I try really hard is not to allow these groups to pit themselves against each other, but to figure out how we have a shared vision going forward and what that's going to take. But it's going to take a lot. Massachusetts has a huge stabilization budget, and it's close, I believe, it's more than $5 billion, and I apologize, I don't have the number right on the top of my head. But I was lying in bed the other night, and I was thinking to myself, we're so proud of the stabilization budget, but we have a $56 billion annual budget. $5 billion, not going to get us too far, right? So we've got big issues. The whole country has big issues. The world has big issues. And I'm hoping that we can figure it out together.
I'm fearful that climate change is going to change that migration that you're talking about too, in addition to the wars going on in the other parts of the world. I think that certain parts of the world are just not going to be as inhabitable in
That's
the
right.
future.
People are starving to death. There's water. There's whole areas in this world now that had water that don't have water any longer. I think that's very true, Pete.
We've got a lot to take care of here. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Denise.
Our next appointment is with the Board of Health, quarterly update.
So it's not so easy to keep a surprise at a public meeting, but hopefully this is a surprise for you, Kathy, and I'd like to invite Denise back up.
Kath, can I come up?
Kathy, you want to come up? Yeah. You too, yeah.
So, Kathy, I was honored when folks in this town said, "We heard you coming for the select board meeting. You know, we've got Kathy Thompson here." And I certainly want to recognize your service. And I want to recognize that I know there's people in the community that want to speak about what your service has meant to them. But I think that what is so very important is I want you to know what it means to the Commonwealth. And that one person really can make a major difference. And I have often said that when I talk about, I'm hoping that together we can find a way to work together on the many problems facing our world, I always believe it begins first in the community. And if we can build a strong community, we can build a strong state. And if we can build a strong state, we can build a strong nation. And Kathy, you have for years and years helped to build this strong community. So in just this gesture, I have a citation for you from the Commonwealth. And if it's all right, Pete, I'd just like to read it
Oh,
briefly.
please do, yes.
Okay.
I hope it's flowery. Because it's well-deserved.
It's well-deserved, and I think other people are going to speak to all the flowers on this. But the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the House of Representatives, be it hereby known to all that the Massachusetts House of Representatives offers its sincerest congratulations to Kathy Thompson in recognition for your care and compassion as a school nurse for all Medfield students and their families, and for your extraordinary efforts for all residents of Medfield, particularly during the declared COVID emergency pandemic. The entire membership extends its very best wishes and expresses the hope for future good fortune and continued success in all endeavors. It is dated today, the 28th of November, at the State House, signed by the Speaker of the House, and with the greatest respect, signed by me, your state representative.
No, I really appreciate that. Thank you, everyone. Anyone who knows me knows how much I love surprises. But thank you. It really was, such a fabulous team effort through the pandemic between our town administrators and school administrators, and a fabulous team of school nurses and our substitute school nurses who helped with our pool testing and home testing programs, and all the former school nurses that came back and helped and did all of our clinics. We did 14 clinics, which, I'm really proud of. All of our residents of Medfield too. We had pediatricians and nurses and lots of pharmacists come in and help us do these community clinics. And Medfield had a greater than 95% immunization rate in not only the schools, but every age group. So it really was such a great partnership with the community that the schools could do that. And really, helped all of us to stay healthy and safe. And we got our new public health nurse halfway through the pandemic, Brenda, that was, sort of on the docket for several years with the town administrator and the Board of Health. That, I'm really so happy that that came out of the pandemic and we're all safer for it. So thank you. This is really great. Appreciate it.
And I've kind of been elected to say a few words about you, which is a gift.
Carol Reed, thank you for coming. Longtime member of the Board of Health. At one time, the only member of the Board of Health.
Look at this group. So thank you. As members of the Board of Health, Melissa Coughlin, Holly Rand, Steve Resch, myself, Kathy Thompson, and Jeff Kane, he's our associate member. Rick Garlick, we want to thank you sincerely for giving us the chance to honor and thank our friend and our fellow board member, Kathy. Kathy joined our board during the start of the COVID-19 pandemic while working to support youth and families through the unprecedented times. She said yes, and she joined us. At that time, public health nursing in the town was contracted through the VNA. So Kathy basically stepped in and guided us all through COVID prior to having Brenda join us full-time. Time and time again, we have heard residents share how grateful they were for Kathy's calm and compassionate conversations, dispelling fears, and offering evidence-based guidance during illnesses. Through it all, she attended our weekly Zoom meetings, facilitated by Christine, the only town manager in the state that was a public health director, and we appreciate her for that. And that's true. She offered us all guidance and hope. Over 40 years that Kathy has lived in Medfield, so many of us have had the opportunity and the blessing to be touched by her kindness and her genuine concern for our well-being and for the well-being of our family members. Some know Kathy as a neighbor. Some know her as a fellow school parent. We raised our children together, standing on the sidelines in all kinds of weather. Some know her as a school nurse and our school nurse leader for over, 20 years. Others know Kathy through her extensive volunteer work with many community organizations, such as Hannah Adams Women's Club. She's the chairperson of the Medfield Home Committee. She is an active member and a leader of the Prevention and Wellness Coalitions under Medfield Cares About Prevention. Although we as residents know her through all these different roles, what people say across these town groups is consistent, that your qualities that set you apart as a person are empathy and genuineness and a quiet yet unwavering commitment to go above and beyond, to help us and to heal us. So, Kathy, you've gone beyond the limits of school age and school buildings, and you've been in the community and extended yourself to philanthropic, charitable efforts and advocacy for youth mental health, substance use, and prevention. And, of course, you lead us on the Board of Health. So you are our hero and a gift to our town. You live the definition of kindness and selfless service to others, and all age residents in our communities have benefited from your generosity of spirit and your patience, and of course your experience as a nurse practitioner. And we all thank you very, very much.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Steve Grenham, and I'm the proud principal of the Dale Street School. I had the privilege to work alongside Kathy from 2015 until her retirement this past June. Throughout our time together, Kathy consistently showed unwavering commitment to the well-being of every student and staff member at our school and in our district. This was never more evident than during the COVID-19 pandemic. In the face of unprecedented challenges, Kathy's extraordinary compassion and determination shine brightly. Kathy not only visited people's homes to ensure their health and safety, but also made herself available at Dale Street during early mornings and late into the evenings for anybody who needed help. In a remarkable effort, Kathy organized 16 COVID vaccine clinics at Dale Street for students and families. I want to give a special shout out to Kathy's husband, Newton, who's here today, who worked tirelessly at those clinics as well. So thank you, Newton.
I now know how to use the Xerox machine.
Kathy worked incredibly hard to compose numerous informative health memos for families, staff, and the administrative team to keep us all educated with the most updated information and safety protocols. I can personally attest that Kathy spent an exceptional amount of time staying late into many evenings, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock, to ensure that we were all as well prepared as possible. As if that wasn't enough, Kathy opened up her home garage to assess and assist those in need, demonstrating an amazing display of selflessness. Kathy Thompson's tireless dedication to health and welfare of the school community has left an unforgettable impact, making her an exemplary and forever cherished member of our team. Thank you, Kathy.
So thanks for letting us hijack our Board of Health update with this, but hopefully you found it more fun.
Is there more?
No, we have on the business front, we have a couple very brief updates. I think Brenda's going to come up and just mention the MAVEN, which is our sort of reportable diseases in the town, and information about the status of our vaccine revolving fund, which is new, this fiscal year. Chief Carrico is here to update on the AED project, which has made some nice strides forward. And then I could spend 30 seconds or a minute talking about shared services, which is our grant with Needham, Dover, and Sherborne.
Okay. And maybe before everybody leaves, maybe we could get a picture of Team Kathy with Kathy before everybody leaves.
I would like to add, I knew I was in good hands when I came to Medfield. You thought I was going to end. No, Kathy took me by the hand, literally, many nights, many days, saying, "You got this." And she gave me a lot of wisdom, a lot of kind words, and a lot of, "Don't worry about it, you got this." And I thank her for that. Now, I'll end this nice little thing and go on. I did a 4-month evaluation since our last little reprieve, and on MAVEN, we have done very, very well as a town, not that we really have any control of our disease processes. However, Lyme, unfortunately, is higher than COVID, which is probably a good thing in some ways, but not in others. I have seen an increase in the Lyme disease in the state of Medfield. I'm sure it's from our area, our surroundings, our trees, the deer. Just driving to Sherburne back and forth, I think I've almost hit 3 of them in the last couple of weeks going to meetings. So I think, we have to really be vigilant and continue to watch if ticks are still out there. We have very minute TB in the community. They're ongoing cases. They're things we've monitored for a while now. Everyone's being treated, everyone's doing what they should be doing, and we continue supporting them in any ways we can. I've worked very closely with Jamaica Plain, the state lab, on a few very interesting, unusual cases that are not a threat to anyone or anything like that, but it's been a great learning experience. One is we had a mumps case. The good thing was it was not mumps in the end, but it was a college student that was a Medfield resident. We learned after I tracked him down on his cell phone that he was living in an apartment in another community. So we transferred him to that other community, but we kept, once you transfer someone to another community, you still stay in the link. Because I'm sure he was home on a weekend prior to this inflamed lymphedema is what he had, when his lymph nodes were swollen. And turned out fine, but it was a very interesting situation where you could almost follow him where he or she went. And it was reassuring from my nursing side that we really can, if we needed to, control something very quickly. And that came in on a Friday night, about 4 o'clock, I think, that case. So, and by Monday, we knew it was not even a real thing. But they notified me by my cell phone. I called upstairs, everything was fine. but it was just interesting how the Maven system really does work and works well. I'll jump to the vaccines. We did our first influenza order this year. I spent $5,000. We got 100 vaccines. I have 9 left. I have 3 high dose, and I have, 7 or 6 regular dose. Doing the reimbursement, which is really not why we're doing it. We're doing it for the health and welfare of the town. We will definitely recount our investment, and we will make sure that that's 100 people that had the flu vaccine in the town of Medfield this season. And I did, out of that, 4 of them were homebound patients that families had called me. They couldn't, VNA, they don't normally have VNA in the home, and I went out and gave them the vaccine, and they were very appreciative. Anyone have any questions?
No, appreciate the report.
No, other than no, thank you so much. I love when you come in, you learn so many little nuggets.
And I do hesitate sometimes because I don't want to frighten anyone or, anything like that, because it's not fearful information. It's all out there. You can probably find it on the internet, a lot worse than I give you. But it's good information to have and to know what to do with it. I've told many people I was an ICU nurse, a PACU nurse for many, many years. I've learned more in the last 2 years than I have in the 30 years I was an
Wow.
ICU nurse.
Wow.
And I'm proud to say I work for this community.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda.
And she?
Is that all for the Board of Health then, or are we going to hear from the chief first? We do want to do that photo first. Should we do the photo first, chief?
Oh, I don't have location photos.
Could anybody that came with Kathy just maybe come up here and you guys can get a photo of everybody? Kathy's team up here, please.
You want to sit in the background or get out of the way?
I was just going to sit.
In the back, all right, let's kind of, I'm going to step out of the way because I think it looks kind of cheesy. Just sitting right behind them as they're trying to take a picture.
Scouts. And what are you going to do for them? Oh.
All right. So I saved my kids, let's roll.
How are you there? Oh, you're gonna, I'll be a bookend. I would know, but it says surgery when you, that would not be good.
Thank you, everybody.
Say, some people know because of walking
Happy to do it. Oh, this is great. This makes these meetings more fun. This is
So Jeff, before you leave, I want to tell you, Steve Grenham had me over to Dale Street to watch him deliver 400 lunches in 4 shifts. He's got that like a well-oiled machine.
Safe to say it's not his first rodeo.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Chief.
At least Pete cleared most of the room for you.
Thank you. Any questions? Good evening. I know you guys have a full agenda, so I'll try to talk as long as I can. Back in March, I was tasked with putting together the vision of AEDs at the ball fields for the Board of Health. And since that time, I was able to purchase 6 AEDs, 6 cabinets, and 6 pedestals that we're going to place at the Wheelock School, Metacomet School, the high school football field, the middle school, between the 2 ball fields, right there at the sign, Memorial Field and McCarthy Park. Those sites were selected because they have power, and the reason why I need power for these AED cabinets is they have a camera, they have a cell phone that you can hit a button, you can call for help, and it also has a heater and a cooling fan. As of last week, all the materials came in, and I'm just waiting for Metropolitan Electric to come into the station so we can review the electrical schematics and look at the wiring for each one of the sites. And then once I get a quote from him, we'll be able to move forward. Depending on what that quote number is, I may have to seek a couple of other bids from electricians, depending on what the number is, so we're 30B compliant.
He's a Medfield resident. Tell him to give you a good price.
I will try. I will try.
Prop to pass around
Oh,
if you wanted
yeah.
to show them the.
So I had sent this to him, so this is basically what it's gonna look like. It stands about that high. There you go. So basically, the pedestal houses the electrical components, and then you bolt on the top. And when you open it up, it sets off an alarm, so you have an audible alarm. So, you know, one of our biggest concerns is that if we go and put these AEDs at the ball fields, are they gonna disappear? We have a couple of ideas that we can also put those iPad detectors.
The tags.
The iTags. I'm not an iPhone guy, so it's iTags. And put those in the devices also. So if somebody were to maliciously come by and take one of them, we'd be able to track it down. But you know, everything is, we're probably targeting the beginning of March for the install. That's my guess. Right now, we're going to lose the weather. The Public Works has agreed to do 3 concrete pads that we need to do because where we wanted to mount these, there is no suitable source to bolt them to the ground. So Mo has agreed to do the concrete pads, and you know, we're all going to work together and get this finished. My goal is March. Have it before the new field, you know, the fields are open, and so we'll be good to go. It's really not that exciting.
So years ago,
Long overdue. I think it's great.
Chief, years ago, I was at a scout event, and I was introduced to a young man who was about 18, and I was told that he basically had a heart stoppage at age 18 and was revived by your firefighters, and so he was basically alive today because of your team of work. This was before you got here, I think, but it was just dramatic to meet a young man was there because of you guys.
Yeah, it's
So that's
especially.
what this can do, I gather.
Yeah, they work. You know, if they're in place and you have somebody who knows how to use them, even if you don't, you just, you know, you open up the device and you just it'll basically tell you what to do. It's very, very simple. And just having those at the fields and hopefully we'll get the word out and we'll have some people trained, because I have a second CPR instructor now that can go online at the fire department. I have another person that has gone to the training, so now we have 2 fully trained CPR instructors. So the goal is to try to get as many people trained as possible, just get these devices out there in operation.
Gus, questions?
Just one, based on what you just said and what you said before that, I've never had the opportunity to look at one of these in detail, open it up and look at it, but I understand that you actually don't need to know anything.
Nope.
You just open it up, and I have a hard time picturing myself in an emergency situation as someone who can't make pancakes without taking time to study the directions. I'm sitting there thinking, popping it open with somebody in trouble, actually being able to go through directions and figure it out fast enough to have it work. But I gather that's really, it's that straightforward.
It talks you right through everything you need to do. It'll tell you to connect the electrodes. The electrodes show you, they have a person on the pad and actually shows you where to put the pads. And you just follow the steps that as it's talking to you. And the biggest thing right now is just to do compressions. It's really what we're spending a lot more time in compressions, because they're finding that as you're doing compressions, you're still getting a little bit of oxygen in as the chest is compressed. So you just want to go to town and try to hit the beat count. You know, obviously when you're as an ALS system, we have a lot more resources and things that we can do. But it used to be a lot of focus on getting the airway and ventilations, and we've kind of taken a little bit of a step back, and we're doing more compressions, better CPR, getting the drugs on board, you know, from the ALS side of it. You know, we've had a couple of saves. We had one not too long ago, probably about a year ago, right in the parking lot of the fire station. A guy came in with chest pain.
Wow.
He coded, and
That's
we
a
brought him
friend of
back.
mine. Yeah, I know exactly. And he told the wife to go to the hospital, and she went right into your parking lot and said,
Yeah.
"Nope, not driving Anita."
Yep, yeah, so it's proof that they work. You know, and obviously the one that we were using is connected to the LifePak 15, which is the cardiac monitor, so we can override. We don't have those, that same prompts on that machine, so we basically, we can just do what we need to do.
Okay.
But, you know, once we get these six locations set up, you know, it'll be a good thing for everybody.
Appreciate what you did here.
So that when you pop one open, is the fire department, police station automatically notified that someone's engaged to use it?
For the new ones that are
Yeah, the
coming,
new one. So the moment somebody does something.
it's
are you-
gonna make a call.
Okay.
So it opens up. It takes a picture of you. It has the phone that's connected. So that's one of the things I have to buy, the little, the SIM cards for each one of the devices. I'm gonna need Owen's help setting them up. They're a little challenging on getting the devices set up because it's all done through the internet too, because those phones are connected to like a server that we have to, you can monitor. And it'll tell you what the temperature in the devices are, you know. And the goal is if we're gonna have extreme weather, we can go down there and we'll just take them out, and then we'll put a sign up saying the AED has been removed. But for the most part, it'll have a cooling fan and it'll have a heating fan.
So it takes away the need for someone that sees someone down and starts to act on them. The moment
You
they
go over, you
engage
grab it, open it up,
You guys know, so you're already on your way.
it'll make the call, and it also has a push button, so you can actually talk to somebody too if you wanted to.
Oh,
So,
wow, okay.
so if you had several people there, somebody could actually hit the phone button and it'll make a call, and I'm gonna have everything go right to dispatch, so that'd be the
Oh, good.
best point of
That's
contact.
awesome.
My only question is, Chief, what's that song that you're supposed to keep a beat to?
Oh, Jesus, there's so many of them now.
Staying Alive?
Staying Alive, yeah.
Well, that's a good-
There's a whole bunch of them.
Thank you so much.
All right, no problem.
Appreciate your work.
Thank you. Lot of work.
Thanks. So just
We're done with the public
yeah,
health stuff.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm here at your pleasure, so I can stop. I have just the one last agenda item we wanted to update you on was the shared services agreement
Oh, good. Thank you.
with the other towns of Needham, Medfield, Dover, and Sherborne. Well, Medfield is us, but Needham, Sherborne, and Dover. And on that front, they had a staff. Their director for that grant turned over, but now the new person is in place and doing great, and we're sort of gaining momentum with the meetings. Our next step, which would involve the select board, as I understand it, is to do an intermunicipal agreement, and that's something I think that comes to you to actually make that legal or what have you. But we're still drafting what that agreement, what's the parameters of what we're going to agree to share and so forth, and how we vote on spending the grant money across the communities and that sort of thing. But so far, we have already been using the grant for buying software, computer software for food permits and septics and all of that kind of public health record keeping that goes on, and it's we contract our environmental health work out, but they use the same software already. So for us to integrate, when it will all be integrated where all communities are using the same software, is kind of neat, and we should be getting better reporting that therefore out of it and a better visibility about what's actually going on. And lastly, they hired a public health nurse that's going to primarily be shared between the two between Sherborne and Dover. That's sort of like a Brenda for them, but that's also a resource that we can draw on if we need, if we have a gap in human resources for some reason, it's available to us. And that's it. Unless there's questions.
Thank you so much. Do you have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks for indulging us on our.
Oh, that
awesome.
was great. Thank you for doing all of that.
That was
So well deserved by Kathy.
Absolutely.
Are you all set with the?
I'm good. No, that was fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you guys for all of that. Our next item is John Woodhull to discuss and request approval of the notice of intent for a proposed footpath and Town of Medfield easement on Jade Walk.
It's not actually a proposed footpath, by the way. The footpath exists. What it is proposed improvements to the footpath,
Okay.
and the easement exists as well.
Is this the footpath that goes across the lawn?
It's not really a lawn, but it does go across someone else's property. It's an easement. yeah.
Okay.
It's
I've
that-
walked
and-
that
and
easement.
It runs
actually-
along the river, the actual walkway, as I recall.
Yes, it borders between I actually have slides I can show you.
Perfect.
so
Okay.
Maybe that's the next thing is,
Mhm.
if we go to the next slide, actually, I anticipated this question, I guess, is the walkway, actually, click it one more time, and there's an insert there. The walkway is shown, and it's right along the river, and what we're actually proposing, actually, I should back up a little to just say that I'm talking tonight really as a member of the Charles River Valley Trails team, okay, that works with the trustees of reservation. And the Trails team is proposing this, is that we're interested in like keeping people's feet dry, but also in improving wetland protection in the short section, which is shown in that little blow up. It's the section immediately adjacent to the Shattuck Reservation. And you're there between the Shattuck Reservation and the Army Corps of Engineers property along the river. And the easement goes along and runs to a 22-acre piece of property that the town of Medfield owns. That was, again, if we move to as we move forward, I'll talk about how the Medfield happens to own it, but really, we should go to the next slide, I think. And this is a picture of the actual, from the land that the town owns, the conservation parcel. And it's accessed via a trail that runs from from the area adjacent to Jade Walk from Shattuck Reservation. Okay, so the next slide, to just move through this quickly, is just something about the history to better understand it. The approval of Jade Walk subdivision in 1993 was conditioned on the grant of the 22.8-acre parcel. The walkway easements connecting the conservation parcel to Jade Walk and the trustees' reservation were essential parts of that agreement. And the combination of the conservation parcel with the easements was seen as a significant public benefit. And Medfield's 2023 Open Space and Recreation Plan recommends improving trail access to and from Shattuck and Jade Walk, allowing the town to better realize that benefit. Okay, then the next slide. So currently there's a short section in the trail adjacent to the boundary with Shattuck that passes through a wetland and is quite muddy. The trail conditions discourage family groups and those who are maybe a little less sure-footed from continuing through. And the addition of a short bog bridge would improve accessibility to Shattuck Reservation from Jade Walk and to Jade Walk Peninsula from the reservation. Okay, then the next slide. And so improving a trail in wet sections protects the environment by keeping users in a predefined location, not treading on wetland resources. It improves access in a way that is safe for the public, protective of wetland plants and animals, and helpful for protection of water resources. Improved access and greater public familiarity leads to stronger support for preservation of natural areas. And then next, one more. The proposed trail improvements would be constructed using sleepers to raise planks above the wetland, allowing light water and wildlife to pass underneath. The use of two 12-inch wide hemlock planks allows comfortable single-file walking while minimizing wetland disturbance. It's a strong structure which easily supports large adults. The rough-cut boards provide a non-slip surface. The wood weathers and blends with the natural environment. And then one last slide. is the Charles River Valley Trails Team is a volunteer group that does maintenance for all the trustees' properties in the Charles River Valley. The Friends of Medfield Forest and Trails is a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting and maintaining forest trails, open space, and natural areas in Medfield. These are groups of local people with trail design and maintenance experience who are interested in the outdoors and in giving back to the community. The project will be designed, permitted, and constructed by the CRV Trails Team for the town of Medfield. That's the presentation.
Thank you. Gus?
So the question, are there questions, I guess?
We start with Gus.
So, this is on a path that's already there, it's already established, you're not moving the
For
path.
30 years at this point.
This is literally, all you're asking for is our permission to put that,
It would be, we'll do all the fundraising to get the money for it, we'll construct it, we'll permit it.
so,
I think backing up one step, you're asking for the approval of the select board to file the notice of intent with.
To file the notice of intent, exactly,
That's right.
because
Your
the,
other property.
the select board is the owner of the easement, and so you're effectively the property owner.
so based on that, my first response is thank you very much for doing this. And then second, this is, there's two thoughts I had. One, this sounds an awful lot like, in a far more rigorous way, the kinds of things we have when people with Eagle projects come and ask for permission to do stuff on town property, and we don't
This
apply
would
this
be
much
an-
rigor to it, so.
This would be an appropriate Eagle project, it's just that it's very difficult for an Eagle Scout to do a project like this now because of the permitting that's required.
Yeah, well, so that, and then the second thing is, because I use the state hospital property a lot, and one of the trails that's sort of off the north field has one of these. Not only do I think these things are good for a purpose of walking, they clearly, it's very clear to me, they're good for the environment in terms of preserving, so you don't have people slogging through
Actually,
mud.
if you just look at
Yeah.
that picture, what that used to look like before that was
Right.
there was
Right.
a muddy mess.
Right.
Yeah.
And on
then the
top of
plants all
that,
grow
Burn
back.
things, right.
on top of that, a rustic improvement to a trail like this, as far as I'm concerned, improves the aesthetics of a trail just because of what it is.
Yeah.
So, again,
And
thanks.
it's
Yeah.
totally the way that we've done this for a lot of other, positions. All of the pictures here are ones that we've constructed in Dover or across the river in Sherburne.
The only question I have is, how long do they last?
About a 10-year life.
Okay.
Part of what we would be doing when we apply with the Conservation Commission is asking also that we be approved to maintain it in perpetuity at the same time, because it will require replacement of the boards at about a 10-year interval.
Okay. I think it's a great idea. I'm glad you're coming, offering to do it.
It should have been done 30 years ago, honestly. At the time that this was originally put in, it was needed then.
Eileen, questions?
So, I didn't even know this existed, so I love the PR we're getting for this right now. If you wanted
I
to.
think actually that's a problem, is that it's relatively lightly used, and I think a lot of the reason it's lightly used is because the access is so difficult.
So if you were to drive to the end of the cul-de-sac that you showed on the map, can you park there and then take the trail, or how do you access the trail?
You can. It's possible to take the trail from if you parked in the cul-de-sac, there's a trail there. That trail is actually quite steep,
Okay.
and I would say it's probably not the preferred way to get in, probably from the point of view of the people who live there as well.
It
'Cause you
it
end up
feels
with a
like
bunch
you're
of
walking
cars.
through the people's side yard, unfortunately.
So where's the ideal access point?
From Shattuck Reservation, which is the trustees of reservation property, which is adjacent.
Okay, gotcha.
So this is literally, there's the property boundary for the trustees is feet away from this wetland area.
So I was actually on the planning board when this came before the town, and it came out of an estate. Jade Walken had a whole property, and in fact, the town tried to interest the trustees in acquiring the property from the estate, but the trustees felt they had enough land in Medfield. But in the course of dealing with the developer for the approval, he wanted a longer length of non-through road than he would be allowed as of right, so there was some negotiation, and the result of that was the open space and the access to it.
Who was the developer?
Dave McCready.
I thought so, yeah.
Actually, Dave and
Craig?
Craig at the time.
No, I think this is fantastic. I love it, so thank you.
Okay.
So I've walked that trail, and I don't remember the trail. What I remember was cutting through the people's lawn and feeling very uncomfortable walking through their side yard, but I think this is a great idea. Thank you for leading it. I didn't know that there was this entity that you talked about, Charles River or something.
The side yard one is the one that comes down beside from the.
Yeah, I didn't know how to get into it from Shattuck, so I went through the side yard and,
But in theory, the houses wouldn't have been built if this wasn't granted, right? So it's like
Yes.
anyone living there, they wouldn't have a house there if the easement wasn't actually.
Right.
So that's why I don't feel bad, because it's like, okay,
no,
that wouldn't
we shouldn't
exist.
feel bad, and I don't know if it's well marked at this point, but that was one of the problems. It wasn't well marked.
I don't, it's a lot of slides back, but where this particular area is there's a very long distance from that house down to this. The house is set well forward from this.
It's an amenity for the neighborhood as well, frankly.
Oh, yeah.
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 So, anyway, we did send a letter to the homeowner whose property this would go through, informing them that we were interested in doing this, and asking for any comments. We didn't receive any response, so I
Okay.
don't know.
You tried.
Okay, thank you for giving them notice. So, I think we're all set. Do we have a motion then to?
Look at it.
You want a motion to authorize me to sign the notice of intent application on your behalf?
That's what I was gonna say.
Sure you were.
So moved.
So motion to have our town administrator sign the proposal of intent for the footpath.
Well, it's
Notice.
the motion to authorize it and to authorize the TA to sign.
You should have gone with so moved.
All right, we'll try it one more time.
But actually, can I add
Go ahead,
something?
go ahead.
Also to accept this as a gift from us, because we don't intend to own it forever. It would be given to the town, which means you own the liability, which I think is your, I mean, not that it's
We've got
a lot,
insurance for that
yeah.
type of.
Okay. Shall we?
Yeah, go ahead. Did you do it, or when I wasn't listening?
All right, so motion to authorize our town administrator to sign and accept. I'm looking towards Mark here to make sure I,
Sign the notice of intent.
Sign the
as
notice of intent.
described, And to authorize the acceptance upon completion of the Bog Bridge.
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye, aye. Thank you, John.
Okay, that
Thanks,
should be good.
Appreciate your spearheading this.
We need to have better writing on this thing when it comes to.
Next, we have Bill Harvey, Chair of the Board of Water and Sewage, to discuss Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund Committee, Emergency Mutual Aid Agreements, request for $105,000 in Norfolk County ARPA funding for additional meter transceiver units. Thank you for coming, Bill.
I had actually placed the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund Committee as a discussion point, but Bill and I worked through it, so we actually don't need to
Okay.
discuss that this evening.
Wipe out A?
You can wipe out
Yeah,
A.
you don't need a motion for that either. I can assure you in our board, prompting someone to create the motion and properly it's a struggle.
And you guys are so careful. I mean, you're like engineers or something. You're
Well,
so
that's worse.
precise.
Right, that's right. It means it doesn't get done. We think about it, right. So, what items you want to cover first? What was the next one?
The emergency mutual aid agreements.
Okay, you know, for the water and sewerage services that the town provides, it focuses on a lot of things from service quality to infrastructure durability, sustainability, the resources, but also in the framework of regulatory and fiscal responsibility. So it means from an engineering and a fiscal perspective, you can't really plan for like every emergency, right? We don't have two of everything. We don't have, you know, 2 Mount Nebo towers. We don't have, you know, an extra water main that's, you know, going down 109. So there are limitations to the amount of embedded redundancy that you can have in infrastructure. But, you know, we do keep, you know, Maurice and his team do keep selected spare parts for some things, but there's some things that are so expensive that you just can't have them around. They might also get antiquated, especially if they're electronics, things like that. So you have to keep a reasonable amount of spare parts, but we can't keep everything in stock. And so sometimes things fail. Parts will fail, or sections of the infrastructure might fail, whether just from use or natural, some sort of natural disaster or some other reasons. And so because of the nature of some items that are in the infrastructure, not everything can be fixed immediately. Sometimes it can take weeks, sometimes even months for certain critical parts to be delivered. So an example of that was like in 2012 when we had, 6 that failed, and that was out for the better part of, I think, 6 weeks or something like that. And that in and of itself forced us into a water restrictions for something like that. And also you think about, even we have a neighboring utility, Aquarian, that was going through needed to have an upgrade, and they came to us looking for some support because they didn't have backup service or backup infrastructure, so they were looking for some help. So there's a desire by the board to think about having an operational backup, a type of a mutual aid agreements with neighboring infrastructure providers. And I wanted to have a dialogue with you about this before we start engaging with other towns. I thought it was just prudent that way to at least get your temperature on it. And I did a little bit of research, and I also got some guidance from Jeremy Marcet, who said that there's something that exists like this already. There's a framework that exists like this already, and there are about 150 some odd towns that have this type of agreement in place to provide mutual aid. It's called the Massachusetts Water Agency Response Network, called the WARN, and it has an association. It has I can read you some of the bylines from how they operate, and they also have a sample agency response. It's sort of like a contract, but in essence, part of this is for neighboring towns to provide mutual aid, whether it's labor or parts or materials, but it also means that if you're asked to provide it, you don't have the requirement to respond, right? So because if you can't provide those resources, or you're just not a good fit for that, you can still decline that sort of thing. So it got us to thinking about not just the services, but establishment of temporary interconnectivity to other systems in case we needed it. Say we had a major failure of something, there might not be enough like water restrictions for us to restrict, that we might need some sort of backup resource and interconnection for a short period of time. And so, with this, it would have to be mutual. This is not providing assistance outbound for an area or a town that can't provide something back to Medfield itself. So there, some of our neighbors, say Millis or Walpole, are probably closest connections to that as well. Even the private company Aquarian, they are the closest to our service area. So for example, if we needed 300 gallons per minute for some period of time, there would be, as part of this is to prepare for it and to have the infrastructure and the agreements in place proactively, instead of trying to arrange this sort of thing. And the heart of this is sort of to strip out some of possible conflicts, or at least have a framework for everyone, a playbook for people to go to for that. And like I said, with these sort of arrangements, the idea is to proactively investigate it, to prepare for it, and if it is there, then there is the you have the ability of asking for it, and there's also the optionality of providing that assistance or not. And so in these contracts, there's a way for recovery of costs and length of service and things like that. So I wanted to explain that this is one of the things that we're investigating, and it's not just we just think that as a board, it's prudent financially, because like I said, to have off-the-shelf spares of a lot of these large things is not something we could just fiscally do. We can't have $300,000-$400,000 worth of equipment in case it might fail, 5 or 10 years in the future. And so even then, that we still might guess wrong. It might not be the right part, might be something else. So this is a case where you can't predict everything in the future, but if you can at least have reasonable agreements in place and have that optionality, I think it provides a better, more durable service to the community. And like I said, it's a playbook in case something goes beyond the town's ability to reasonably bring the equipment, whether it's the wastewater plant or the water pumps or the water filtration plant, back in line in a reasonable period of time. Any thoughts?
Thank you. Gus, you want to start?
Yeah. One of the very first clients I ever had, and when I started out as a consultant, one of his favorite lines is one I've always liked, which is, if this is the answer, what's the question? And what I'm just trying to understand is, right now, it sounds like maybe neighboring communities, just in the spirit of being good neighbors, would try to help a neighboring community that was in a bind, to include even a private water company like Aquarian being either willing to ask for help or to provide help.
That's right. We actually entertained that request at one point, and it turned out that they ceased their request. We didn't hear from them again, but their request, when we looked at it, it didn't seem like it was going to be a protracted or a large demand load. There were some technical questions about how to increase the pressure, another 20 psi to get it where it had to go. But by and large, the board is open to having being a good neighbor like this, because like I said, we might need something like this in the future.
Town council has a question. Is it okay to interrupt?
Actually, two comments. First of all, early in my tenure, we had a situation arise where it was planned to paint the Mount Nebo water tower, scrape and paint it inside as well as out. They were drawing it down, and they had not made any kind of provision. The only other water tower was the old hospital water tower. So I found out about it by happenstance. We had some discussions with our water and sewer board, and they approached Norfolk and got an emergency connection on the QT for that one situation. So that would be one example. The other thing is, there is legislation, which I think is what Bill's alluding to, the state enabling legislation that they passed for dealing with regional emergencies. One's public safety, and I think the other's Department of Public Works.
And also FEMA. Part of this is in the spirit of extending the
Okay.
regional response, where MEMA or FEMA could.
When the specific legislation was passed, it was a local option, and I brought it to the attention of both Franklin and Medfield, and I think it was a select board or a town meeting, but either way, we signed on to both the regional public safety and the regional DPW enabling legislation. So that's already in place.
So I guess what I'm trying to get my arms around is, right now, without a formal agreement in place, we generally would be willing to try to provide aid, or we would feel comfortable requesting aid, and the aiding town or community is free to say no. It's not clear to me how this agreement changes that overall regime, except that it sounds like maybe it establishes some standard, I'll call them SOPs, around things like when we trade water with each other, we will charge at the rates that our users, we might pre-negotiate certain terms and conditions for that exchange. So it's not so much it's going to change, I may be wrong about this, but it sounds like it doesn't really change operationally what we would be willing to do. It might help pre-package the agreements and the terms by which we do it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment, and I think, in a perfect world, all of that would take a matter of hours, right? But I think that if this thing, if there wasn't a situation, whatever, third week in July, where, people are on vacation and trying to get you all together and others together for an emergency meeting, as well as the adjacent communities, and then you'd have to vet the 2 or 3 possible options, and they would have to vet their ability to respond, and also for them to, put this framework together. There's a lot of moving pieces when the well is running dry, right? Or when the water main has, the water main is being fixed, or whatever that is.
So the hope would be that this, again, I'm just trying to see how this is moving, what ball forward in what way. It sounds like maybe something behind this is also sort of a desire at strengthening the region's ability to deal with disruptions, because not all disruptions only hit one town even.
That's true.
So it would be to try to basically build a greater, I'll call it regional resilience, in the ability of the infrastructure to respond to things that perturb the
That's true, and it's my understanding that the Mass DEP supports programs like this to provide, a regional durability. Yeah, in one sense, we are using shared resources, water resources coming in, we use it, and then we treat it, and the water gets released back out into those, into those resources. So this is not just water, but this is also wastewater as well. And I think to the extent which it makes sense, there might be some investment, that's required for certain connections or for certain agreements.
Okay.
So, for example, it can be envisioned that to get water from here to Millis, we need a steel skid with 2 pumps and a motor control center and a breaker system, and that and that's connected, and that can be wheeled in and connected, and then provide you provide the temporary piping to get it to the interchange point like that. So you can see, if we were going to do this with X or Y or Z communities, the infrastructure might be a little bit different for that connectivity, and that you could see that I think that would be a wise investment. For example, say it costs whatever $100,000 for 2 communities that we do that with. That's probably money much more well spent than trying to predict and choose which large capital spares that we need to carry, and ultimately possibly be wrong. And therefore we're able to, wait for the long lead time item like the pump to come in while we have this sort of thing, I'm not going to say it's plug and play, but it's plug, turn wrench, test it, flush it, and put it online.
So at any part of this then, when we talk about spares, like the skid part I can see could go anywhere, but with the right fixtures. But when we talk about spares, is there any intention here for a group of communities to come together to come up with an overall sparing strategy that says, well, if we buy the pump that's the spare pump, you're replacing the water treatment filter element, that you have one spare. So, is there it sounds like it could potentially expand out into
That's
the
possible.
procurement.
Like
Okay.
I said, I haven't gone any farther than the internet. and that's,
Okay.
you know, that's a scary place, right? No, the internet and a little bit of guidance. But before I, peel the onion on this, especially with different communities and understanding their infrastructure and their interest in this, I wanted to just bring this to your interest and either provide some guidance or guardrails or first steps before we start doing it. Because also, as part of our liaison program, I'm the dedicated liaison to you. So we have people who are liaison to the Board of Health and others, but I'm here to report out to you in this area of interest.
So let me just close with 2 points, and then Mark may want to say something. First off, I think you're asking, does it make sense for me to explore the possibilities here? So this is just an exploration question. That makes it kind of easy to say, sure. The two, I'm not doing this to throw water on the idea, but the two reservations that crop up for me on the radar screen, one, part of this conversation sounds a little bit like a conversation that we had 4 or 5 years ago around, wouldn't it be great if 3 or 4 towns would get together and perhaps not every town needs its own street sweeper, and not every town needs its own grader, so we could have one town get the street sweeper, one town get the grader, and then we would exchange. And
That was before Uber. Now we can use Uber.
What I was told at the time, at least, was that never seemed to work out very well, because the town that procured the equipment tended to have it and own it. So it wasn't really just the shared community resource. So I'm just making that observation in terms of investing, having one town invest in something with the idea that all towns benefit. I don't know how well that'll work. And then the second thing is, only because of the Pulte project up at Dover at the town line and the sensitivity people here in this town have around something that's not going to happen, but they're still worried about it happening, which is having another town connect into our system.
This is a case where, first of all, it would be for, this is not an extension of service.
Right.
Okay? And this is not to extend service to another town that can't provide something reasonably mutual, beneficial to our town. So to a place that's not currently being served, or someone that, whether it's that private utility or that town itself doesn't want to participate, well, then we obviously we can't.
So my only point on that is one around timing.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the general public will be as good at understanding the distinction just made at the current time, but it may not matter, because if this is investigating it, the decision point doesn't come up until somewhere down the road, and we may be past this. It's just a
and there actually
sensitivity.
might even be limitations for it to even be worth it with some towns. Like, so for example, the interconnection to Aquarian all the way up 109, you go past Tubrek, and then up to Draper, just between Tubrek and Draper, there's a connection there. Well, it's a pretty small service, and for them to expect that they're going to provide a reasonable relief or source, I don't know. We got to investigate that.
Yeah.
And so someone, whether it's by virtue of current ideology in the neighboring town or the private utility, or it's just the nature of the resource and getting it from place to place might be hard, or it just might not be, really, it might be just a marginal difference or marginal aid compared to what we're looking for is something else. So some of this will probably self-select, I believe, with a little bit investigation.
That's it. Mark has it.
Mark?
Yeah, there's layer upon layer of legal issues here, and I would, offer my availability and encourage you to take advantage of it.
All the time.
Generally speaking, any of these types of things that are being talked about would require select boards from all affected municipalities to sign on under, because they would qualify as intermunicipal agreements, and that's who has authority in the various communities. The other observation is there's a huge legal distinction between municipalities or governmental bodies dealing with each other and a private body in the picture.
Hmm.
So you cannot substitute a private water company for a municipal one, and the legal consequences are way different. And on top of all that, because it is water and it's controlled ultimately by the state, DEP has a place at the table one way or the other. All that being said, it would make sense to try to be proactive and put some kind of a framework in place, because if for no other reason, if you're dealing with three or four municipalities and you have to get all their select boards to meet and sign off, that can drag out for 4 to 6 weeks. So if you can put some framework in place and have it good to go, that would make sense.
All set? Eileen?
So you just tagged on what I was thinking at listening to you talk, Gus, which is, so Bill, the framework would be in place, but then when the trigger to act to go would, that's when the select board for the 3 or 4 municipalities would kick in. So it's not just like the sewer and water board would have the ability to say, yeah, we'll do this. It still comes back to the board since it's the resource of the town.
No.
No?
They would, you would all have determined and agreed upon the framework. All the various select boards, it's a memorandum of understanding. It can be as generalized or as detailed as you want it to be. There's no magic to it, but once you have it in place, for it to become effective, all the select boards would have to then sign in advance.
But if they sign in advance, who's determining that this significant event qualifies?
So
Well,
I can help answer that a little
Okay.
bit. So they have a sample agreement that they supplied.
Okay.
And, the execution agreement does not create any duty to respond to requests for assistance. And when a member receives a request for assistance, the authorized official shall have absolute discretion as to the availability of the resources. An authorized member's decisions on the availability of resources shall be final. So
we
if-
appoint an authorized official.
Right,
to make
right,
the
and
decision.
It's
I
not a
work
lot
at the
different.
appointment of you, so if you decide that is,
It's not a lot different than any other mutual aid
Yeah.
agreement
Yeah.
for public safety or whatever.
yeah.
And then, again, you kind of went down the path I was thinking, because the Pulte thing came to my head right away. I want to make sure that then in terms doesn't set a precedence, that if you gave here, that that a builder could come along and cry whatever excuse they may have, that especially if it's a 40B, I just want to make sure we're not setting any precedent that would force us to do something that.
It's a different mechanism.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah.
All set? So my first question was, it sounds like Jeremy said that there's already this thing that's in existence, or are we creating something new? Are we just joining the one that's in existence?
So, I don't know.
Okay.
When I looked at the list of the 155 towns, none of them are around here.
Oh,
That's a
Okay.
problem.
it's a lot of towns. but-
That's not a problem. I mean, it can be one of those, I don't know. I've only been around here for 10 or 12 years. I don't know the reasons why we didn't sign up to this or why it wasn't marketed there, and I don't know. I'd have to do a dot plot to figure out, are they around there for some reason? But I think it provides a reasonable framework for it. And sometimes it just takes someone just picking up the phone and
Sure.
knocking on a door and going to Millis and going to Walpole and, just be candid with the intent and see what it's like. I know there's a new board was it in Millis that created a new water board where they didn't have one before, or was it Medway?
No, Midway has one.
What's that? Okay, so I think, I believe that if we don't become part of this association, at a minimum, using the framework of these contracts with each of these, and that we have, they're, bidirectional, with each of these towns, or, if we have one with one town, we have one with another town, the terms and conditions might be a little bit different, right? The expectation for the amount of water and the interconnection and whether it's the shared cost to build that infrastructure might be a little bit different from one town to another. So I think at a minimum, what this association, I think, has provided as a utility is a framework that, look at, there's 155 towns that figured out how to do that, and they're over there. Now, we might need to, adapt that, with Mark's guidance, and I'm sure Mark counterpart on the other side of the table like this. But to show that they're, half the, maybe you can call it a third to a half of the communities in the state are participating, that shows that it can be done.
Yeah.
And people have worked it out. And it's not, and also with the board that M.A. Warren has, I'm sure they can provide some coaching to, some of the issues or problems, or what would be reasonable language or solutions to, places that don't quite mesh contractually or infrastructurally, and they can provide that guidance. So we're not blazing any new path here, is what I'm saying, and we maybe can use the best of the experience that's already out there.
So you wanted the temperature of the room, and it sounds like I'm very much in favor of your exploring this. It makes sense to me. I understand that it's for two things. It's not only for the water that one might need at times, and I'm glad to hear that we had a connection to Norfolk, that we could just apparently flick a switch, I would hope, and reactivate.
They had to put it in place. Wasn't
But
in
also
place.
for all of these parts, and for all of these parts, it doesn't matter whether these other water districts are next to us or not, because, they can ship the part that. we'll
Right.
get it
Well,
to.
And
the
it also
problem,
could be
the
for
problem with
labor as
that
well.
is somebody has to order it and pay for it. That's the problem, the logistics of procurement.
Well, hopefully, all of these 155 towns that are part of this have their inventory online, so they can see each other's parts. So that, as Gus was bringing up, if you have the flywheel, I won't buy the flywheel, I'll buy the extra pump or something, so that we don't duplicate parts, but, they'll figure it out. I'm sure you explore it, please. It makes sense.
Okay.
So,
And the truth is, even if we decide to join this framework itself and this network, you could think about it like, out of the 155 towns that are there, do they have a PLC board for their SCADA system that's, a 45-minute drive that we can use, as opposed to waiting for Siemens or Allen Bradley to crank one out of their factory, 2 or 3 months from now, and getting it through their distribution channels. So,
And if we buy a spare, then as you say, in 5 years, they may have changed the software that it plugs into or something, then it doesn't work anymore, it's not compatible.
right. Yeah, like I said, I think this feels good. I think the devil will be in the details. I think that some of the candidates, there'll be some self-selection, because of our needs and their needs, and also, we just might be sort of perpendicular, so to speak, in needs and requirements, or they may not be interested, politically at this time.
All right,
So.
so in addition, you want 105,000 of ARPA funds, it sounds like.
So that is for a different item. That is for.
Ready to move on or not?
Huh?
Are we ready to go to that, or?
We can move as fast as you want. Yeah, right. So those are for additional MXUs, which is a piece of hardware that's being used to create a fixed network, so that there's real-time access to information from the water meters. And these are actually additional meters that actually weren't originally procured due to town growth, and I think there's maybe some clerical errors in the number of MXUs that were supposed to be ordered with the first purchase order. I get that right, Frank?
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Is that little thing the size of a quarter that sits on the top of my water meter?
I don't know. I don't know. They came to my house. I said, my meter's not
Something
right.
new sitting on my water meter recently, so.
I can tell you, when they come in and replace a meter and all of that, the team comes in and out, and they're in and out of my house. It was like 18 minutes. I didn't even know. I've had you can't even meet with the contractor and get.
That little quarter-sized gizmo was wired in the wiring one, so.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
probably the
possibly,
thing that
yeah.
reads my meter
Right.
now.
So the hope is that by the October meter reading in '24, that we'll have targeting greater than 70 or 75% of all these up and installed. There still will be some that haven't been done because we have to get into, some houses are hard to get into, or some residents aren't cooperating as much, so it's taking a while. They also have to be available. There's going to be an outreach program to get people to understand that this is going to be really in their interests, specifically to have set points so they know how much water that they're using. So if they have, the classic toilet flapper stuck up and, it's using water, that there is a way to measure instantaneously how much water is going through there. So if over a period of time you're using a lot of water, that you're alerted to that, instead of currently now, they know every 6 months with our current reading. The future state is we like to go to, quarterly billing for more, smoother revenue profile. But, this will provide, the better, better functionality and better accuracy. And also if a customer does have a leak or a slow leak, at least this sort of nips it part of the way in the bud, something's trending, as opposed to taking it to the other extreme. If we read meters only once a year, you would have a really big thing like that. So we occasionally have customers that have leaks and they're unexplained. And as long as the water goes to the meter, they have to get billed for it. We don't know if it went down the toilet, or someone left the garden hose on, or something that's sort of unexplained. But having these devices attached to the network will provide, what we want is to have a customer portal and have sort of default alarm points so that they can opt into getting alarms to know if something is, if they're using more water than normal.
So you were talking about quarterly billings, is that something that's in your future?
That's in Bill Harvey's future. I just have to see if our departments can accommodate, that sort of thing.
Whether the departments can get the bills out, or what's the issue?
Getting the bills out, but it's the collection, it's just more activity downstairs and clearing accounts and things like that.
Twice the work, right? I mean,
Huh?
it's twice the work, because if you do it twice now, it'd be 4 times a year. So
On one hand, it can be seen like it's twice the work, but I think that, our customers have, they pay almost everything monthly, right? Some things quarterly, but there's hardly anything I could think of that people would pay twice a year. And there are circumstances where, the enterprise fund, and it happens every once in a while, we have to eat a bad bill because the data is not good, or the data is not real time, or there are a variety of circumstances where that the board, there's an appeal to a bill, and there's a $7,000 bill that we have to deal with, or we have to basically non-bill for. So there are actual revenue costs associated with having long billing periods, and where the customers don't feel like they're in control. We're in a day where they know how many megabytes are left on their data plan. They have, they're sort of used to that right now. They know how many therms that they're burning in gas per month, and I think bringing it, closer to, what their expectation is, I think is what they want.
Well, think of it this way, if you had it online, all you have to do is go in, your account number, everyone knows when they get their tax bill, they've got a number associated. So if you had the ability to just go in, see your account, and see what your water usage is, that would be
That's
heavenly.
right, even if it's not a bill, for you to say, okay, it's December 29th, and here I am looking up, the next year, and see how much water I've used, and how much I've used, you know, say in the last couple of months, how did that trend?
Yep.
I think I think just good customer service, and I think it's good business.
Well, I think that, I mean, Eversource does it, right? You can see what you used a year ago, and
Oh,
so
yeah.
you become more conscious of, wait a minute, what did I just do last month that spiked it versus a year ago? So water usage, because it's just so precious, to me, just makes sense if we can get closer to that.
That's right, that's right, and I think that, you know, it is, you know, it is it's the resource that we borrow from the environment and use and send it back, and, you know, for customers to not know that that's going through there, I think that hurts, especially if they have to pay for a leak that they didn't know about. It can run into the thousands very quickly. I know I had classic toilet flapper up myself, you know, about 5 years ago. It was not cheap. It was not cheap. So yeah, so this is for we would like to use ARPA funds for these additional MXUs that need to be ordered. So this is not for an existing order, this would be for a new order, and that's why it qualifies for ARPA funds. You can't use ARPA funds for an existing purchase orders, so.
Want me to motion?
I've got a couple of questions.
Okay.
We've been swapping meters for the last several years in order to be able to read meters from the road and just go by and get the reading off the meter without actually going in. Is this the same meter as those meters?
This is an attachment to the current state of the current meters. There are still some older meters that are still being replaced. So, in other words, this is so that someone doesn't have to drive up and down the street 24/7. This is really what this is.
That's actually what was behind my
Yes.
question. So we put
Yes.
some kind of new equipment in where people do have to drive up and down the street.
Right.
You're saying this is an
Right.
add-on thing
Yeah.
that will transmit, I guess, over the
Yeah,
internet, so they don't even have to do
I
that.
believe it's termed a mesh network.
Okay.
Think of, you ever hear of Sonos speakers, like one speaker becomes an antenna for the next, and
Yeah,
the
they'll feed
antenna
off
for
one
the next. So this is, you know,
Okay.
one meter becomes a means of getting to information to the next and to the next. So the extremities of your system actually become the farthest antenna to transmit everything back.
So my real question is, so all the money we spent on those other new meters is still money well spent? This is just an
Yeah.
add-on that ties them all together?
Yeah, and it's also recognized that, we need to have a certain amount of meters in stock. At the last meeting, the board was discussing, how many meters we should have, in stock and in spares, so we're not, we're ordering them sort of not in bulk, but, a reasonable quantity that we get a good price, and to have those as shelf spares. And, so when we're able to get into some of the houses that are older or in some very difficult places, we have the equipment that's required at that
So
time.
these are not the meters, this is separate, the meters are the meters.
This is
a
not the meter.
transceiver unit that goes on the
Yeah,
meter.
right.
So it's just an add-on that might be a quarter-sized thing. You want $105,000 for 4 of them, does that mean these things cost $26,000?
Not for 4, no. This was,
Oh, I missed. I thought you said 4 MXUs.
no, I never said a quantity.
Oh.
Let me
How
look at
many
my-
of them? So what do they cost?
Let me look at, there, actually, I didn't attend that board meeting. I
Must
took-
have
took
misheard. I
notes.
thought I heard the number.
755.
26,000. 755 of them, oh, okay.
Yeah, so we
Okay.
need 755 of them. They're $138 a unit, so it's about
Okay.
105,000.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Am I close?
All right,
Yeah.
want a motion?
Please.
All right, so motion to approve the request for $105,000 in Norfolk County ARPA funding for additional meter transceiver units.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
You have
it
any
sounds-
other questions?
Just
while
to
I'm here?
satisfy my own personal curiosity, are you testing the water in other houses in town, or is it just mine?
I don't know what that means.
Okay, it's just me then.
Is this a bad Netflix movie, or what?
The bottle?
Jug.
Yeah, no, we got it too. I think
Oh,
we
you're
have a
testing all the
reputation
select
that
board members.
we're among the
You don't
most
got me?
compliant citizens, that's all.
No jug at this end of the table.
I'm not.
All right, just
not
the
sure.
nails then, all right.
I get up in the morning and I peed right in that bottle. And made sure-
I'm not sure where this is going. I can, just as on a fiscal update, I was doing, so one thing that I instituted a few years ago when I came on to, as the chairman, was to start doing a budget variance or revenue variance analysis. And that's to look at summer billing, which is the big bill, and also the sort of year-to-date other fees, services, penalties, and other things that, you know, fall into some other bucket. And then we approximate what the revenue is going to be for the next billing cycle, which is the winter cycle. Our water use is very constant. You know, people are not watering their lawns. Obviously, there's a handful of skating ponds and skating rinks that people put up, but by and large, it's not that. But you know, we had a very, very dry early spring, March and April. I know this because I had a landscaping project and was watering like crazy. But then, you know, the clouds opened up and we had a lot of rain in the summer. So we do expect there's probably going to be a slight revenue shortfall, probably in the order of maybe about $100,000 on the water side. Which, all things being, you know, considered, you know, how much rain we got, I don't think that that's going to be a really big shortfall or to be unexpected. I think the actual shortfall is right now it's about 100 and targeted to be about almost 200. But I think that what usually happens is that we also get a lot of funds that come in for connection fees and things like that. So I think that 200 will probably come down to maybe 125 or 100 by the time this rolls up for the rest of the fiscal year. So it would be the April billing, and then, you know, the construction and the other fees that we collect, you know, leading up to June 3rd. And also for sewage, right now we're projected to be also a little bit light. The projected variance is about 81,000 out of the 2.1 projected. And that also might come down as well with some existing fees. But I can't imagine that we're going to be above what we predict. I think we'll probably be a little bit short, but considering, you know, all the rain that we got, and, you know, I think that's why we have, you know, that sort of cash balance is literally a rainy day fund.
Yep.
So,
Thank you very much, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Appreciate your coming in.
thank you.
Our next agenda item is a discussion item discussing the process to fill the vacancy on the school committee. And Christine and I have been spending a lot of time and getting a lot of input from Tim Knight from the school committee, and Jeff Marsden and Michelle Kirkby. And Tim has sent us an outline of the process. I'll just run down it as he listed it. Declare candidacy, as he says, done. Request applications, done. School committee distribute all applications to school committee and select board on or about November 29. So those are gonna, the 8 or so candidates are gonna send in their materials, and then they'll come to us and to the school committee.
How many did they get? Or did they not get any yet?
8.
8, okay.
Let's see, we asked candidates to submit EOD on 11/28 if they wanted that information to be considered.
11/28 or 11/22?
11/28.
So you got
So that's
extended?
today. It was like at 5 o'clock today.
Your candidacy by the 22nd, and then there was a follow-up email that went out asking for a one-pager with questions to
Okay.
answer.
Ah,
while
okay.
you're
And a resume if
Okay.
they wanted to
So
add
it
a
was due in
resume.
by the end of the day
Due by the
today?
end of
Okay,
today.
okay.
I anticipate sending them out. I'll get them tomorrow, send them
Okay.
out to everybody, and they'll be included in your packet. We anticipate having the special election on December 5th.
So next Tuesday.
At our next meeting. And the school committee will attend with us, and at that meeting, we'll open a joint meeting. We'll walk through the process to clarify it. And school committee's gonna lead the election, since it's their member that's getting elected. And you need a majority, and so that there are 4 of them and 3 of us, so someone needs 4 votes to be elected to the position. And again, the position is only gonna serve until the next town election, which is in the end of March, so it's a couple-month appointment.
So one of the questions I have for our discussion tonight, and I think this is a question for the school committee, it's not a position, is should we even appoint someone for what'll effectively be 2 months? Last year, at the beginning of this year, when there was the discussion of whether Jessica Riley could stay on the building committee, the argument for that was that 2 newly elected school committee members needed more than 2 months to come up to speed just with the school committee, that wouldn't, let alone the building committee. So I think it should be a school committee decision, but I want to ask the basic question, is it even worth going through the drill for basically the months of January and February to have somebody that presumably wouldn't necessarily be the continuing.
Okay.
That question, and the question
I
that
think
then
they've already,
ties to that.
I think they've already answered that by putting this forward and wanted us
Well,
to do
then,
this.
if in fact that's true, the only other point I would make is, do we know whether any of these candidates have indicated that they do not intend to run for school committee in
Right,
the
'cause
March election? Because what the thing I'm reacting to is, you install someone 2 months before an election, that gives them an inside track.
As the
And
incumbent.
is that actually something that we or the school committee actually wants to do? I would suggest maybe that's not what we want to do. So the reason I'm asking the basic question is whether in fact that's, I don't think you want to do that. Then if you don't want to do that, then you need to know whether there's candidates that are not intending to run, they're just willing to step in.
Well, because it's interesting you say that, because I think, and Christine, you can correct me, but I would assume that the papers for nominations come out sometime in the next week.
They're out the second week of December, I believe.
Yeah, so that's,
Yeah.
I almost wish we were doing it a week later, because it's like, okay, did you all pull papers? Because if you didn't,
Yeah,
there's your, answers your question.
and we could probably even do that if we wanted to, because I doubt there's gonna be a lot going on over the holidays, but we will have a second one. My point is that I think you want to encourage people to want to run in the election.
Right.
And I don't think you want to do something that actually either subtly or not so subtly discourages anybody from running other than a designated successor.
Yep.
So I would suggest we at least, I do think it's the school committee that should make that decision
100%.
about whether we appoint
Because it's their
someone.
committee, we're shorting them if we don't do
Yeah.
that. If they need
Yeah.
that body, that
Yeah.
seat filled, yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Well, I think they're asking us to do
Well,
this.
I
so
think
they've made that
we should ask
decision.
them. I don't know that they even considered the question.
Well, I was just gonna say, yeah, that's, I
Right.
mean, Tim might be like, I never even thought of that. We
Right.
could skate by for 2 months, because really, it's,
And the policy says we will appoint, not we shall, so recognizing the legal distinction between will and shall says it's not a mandatory thing, it's a decision.
No, it's may. The alternate is between may.
I think the,
It says, will and shall are the same thing. May is the discretionary one.
will and shall mean the same thing?
Yeah,
So you're saying we don't have a choice?
right.
Well, it actually says the two governing bodies will meet to fill the vacancy. It doesn't actually say we will fill the vacancy. So my point, I think my point will
it's
stand.
the loophole I was talking about
My-
earlier.
my-
Be
my
careful of
point
those
will stand-
loopholes.
My point stands, to be honest, it's the school committee that has a greater stake
Right.
in the legitimacy of the election than we do, in the sense that they have to live with the consequences of their actions. But I think it's a question worth asking. If it was 6 months earlier, I wouldn't be raising it. I think 2 months before the election, it's at least worth asking the question.
So then, if no candidate gets a 4-vote majority, then we have another round of voting. And we keep voting until the candidate receives a majority.
Works in the Netherlands.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Happy that?
So that's an email that we will get, or I haven't
We
seen
can
that.
share it with you, yeah. It
It's
just-
basically, he's just restating what's in the statute.
Okay.
And they've talked with their attorney about it.
Candidates is,
Okay.
okay.
Next action item is a request from Memo. A, annual holiday parade scheduled for December 2 at 1 PM beginning and ending at the middle school. B, annual tree lighting, caroling, and selection of Santa's elves on Friday, December 1 at 6:30 at Baxter Park.
Maybe we could have the selection of Santa's elves and the selection of the replacement of the school committee.
So whoever sings the best?
Best he is.
Your costume contest.
So, motion?
I guess, these are on a consent agenda, are they now?
No, they're actually not, still need to
Okay.
vote.
So yes, a motion, please.
Motion?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, so a motion to approve Memo's request for the annual holiday parade schedule for December 2nd at 1 PM beginning and ending at the middle school, as well as the annual tree lighting, caroling, and selection of Santa's elves on Friday, December 1st at 6:30 at Baxter Park.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye. Next is a discussion and vote to confirm fee structure for weights and measures. Chris?
So as you know, we have a, sorry, I'm just pulling out. We have a new sealer of weights and measures in town. And this is also part of my, quest, I think, we call it quest, to put everything in writing, to make our policies and our fee structures in writing. And I could not locate where you had last voted a fee schedule for weights and measures. So we worked with Erica, who is our new sealer of weights and measures, to make the fee schedule here in Medfield match the fee schedule that is both in Millis and Medway, so that we are on a consistent basis. So I'm just looking for confirmation of this actual fee schedule.
Excellent. Any questions?
Geez, when I look at some, like, taxi meters, $75. What are some of these?
You could have the only one.
If we had a taxi license in town, you have to have your meter checked every year
Make sure it's calibrated.
to make sure you're not overcharging.
And then automated retail checkout systems up to 3 scanners and then
Yeah.
additional,
Yeah.
so is that, so if Shaw's has, is that where, is that?
Yep. You do
Interesting.
annual inspection to make sure that they are ringing correctly, that when you get a pound of cheese at Brothers, you're actually getting a pound of cheese.
So the bottle and can refund machine they have at Bullard's, I was reading this the other night, I'm like, where are these fees coming from? All right, interesting. Did not know we did this.
So can we get a motion on that then?
Are we good? No questions on that? All right, all right, so motion to approve the fee structure for weights and measures.
Is that got a date on it or something that identifies it?
What's that?
No, but it currently is the only one that exists, so,
It's the one that's in the materials. Why don't we reference it that way? It doesn't have a date on it, Mark.
All right, well, anything to make it specific, that's all.
What do you mean by that?
So,
Well,
we'll
if
put
it
a
were-
date on the top.
Today's date.
yep. Good idea. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next item is capital budget and MBSF budget update. Vote to increase municipal
So this
building
is,
stabilization fund override by 2.5%.
So the capital budget committee, as you know, I think we started meeting the end of August, beginning of September. They have held several meetings and they have made their recommendation to you and to the warrant committee for both the capital stabilization fund and the municipal stabilization fund. The vote for the municipal building stabilization fund is predicated on the annual 2.5 increase the select board controls over the municipal building stabilization fund. Our policy, both with the capital stabilization fund and the municipal building stabilization fund, is to keep the balance in those funds that we always have a year ahead, so that we're operating to be able to fund the next year, regardless of what happens at town meeting. In addition to that, I just wanted to put on your radar, the capital budget committee is going to come to the select board. We have a planning session in January. We plan on being at a meeting in February to talk about some long-term strategies. As you know, we've been wrestling for several years now about how to fund sidewalks Mo came to you last November and talked about the heat map that he had prepared for some of the gaps we have in sidewalks. Not a week goes by that I don't get a request for a new sidewalk in town. And $150,000 in our capital budget is not going to meet the demands of either of those. So we'll come to you in February and start talking about a long-term dedicated funding source for making that happen. I think the Capital Budget Committee is committed that of all the things we do in the town, sidewalks really have the most impact on people's daily lives. So we want to start addressing that on a more holistic level.
Gus, questions?
No, I think
Eileen?
Nope. Understand?
Okay.
All right, vote to approve the capital budget and MBSF budget update and, so, sorry, let me reread that. Vote to approve the request to increase municipal building stabilization fund override by 2.5%.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Number 10, request to award a joint purchase 2023 to 2024 salt bid award to Eastern Minerals, Inc. as the primary bidder awardee and Morton Salt as the secondary bid for road salt.
I would like to first thank Mo and his team for working on this. They actually run this joint salt bid for 17 other towns in the Commonwealth. It's not easy to put all of this together, so kudos to him. There were a couple of roadblocks put in his way by me this year, so I appreciate him working through those. You are just approving the rock salt, and Mo is happy to report that it is less expensive this year than it was last year.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions, Gus?
Nope.
Eileen?
So you're gonna have two motions, one to award the joint purchase and one to approve the contracts.
All right, so first motion is to award the joint purchase of the 2023-2024 salt bid award to Eastern Minerals as primary bid awardee and Morton Salt as a secondary bid for road salt. And then,
You can do it
Separately.
what's that?
Second.
Second.
That's item 10.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, and then a second motion is to approve the
Contracts.
contract, oh, that's right, because they were in there. Approve the contract for the 2023-2024 salt bid award to Eastern Minerals as primary bid awardee and Morton Salt as a secondary bid for road salt.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye, aye. That was number 11. Number 12 is vote to authorize the town administrator to sign a grant agreement of $36,000 awarded through the Community Compact Program for a shared ground services feasibility study.
This was a study I had talked to you about earlier this year. We applied for the grant, we've received it. This is actually just authorizing me to sign the paperwork to have the funds transferred to us. I will be bringing forth a contract to you at a future meeting. We're meeting with the Collins Center tomorrow to finalize their scope of work, and we'll be ready to award that contract, start work on it right away.
So my question on that around the scope, I just want to make sure I understand what this was saying. I know that on one hand, we were looking at rationalizing ground maintenance in the town. This sounded like this was actually looking at, I'll say, regionalizing. Is this multi-town, or is
No,
this strictly
just-
inside the town, figuring out the best way to do it? Okay, good.
Regionalizing ourselves.
Yes, yes. Okay, I'm all set.
All right, Eileen, any questions?
I'm good.
I'm good too. Motion
All
then,
right,
please?
So motion to authorize the town administrator to sign a grant agreement of $36,000 awarded through the Community Compact Program for a shared ground services feasibility study.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next item is number 13, vote to authorize the town administrator to sign a Commonwealth standard contract accepting a $50,000 earmark for a sustainability coordinator.
And I had a question on this one, maybe two. Does this require us to hire a sustainability coordinator, or can we use it to hire a contractor as a sustainability?
We can do either one.
We can do either one,
Yep.
okay. And the reason I was sensitive to that is if it was gonna be, we're gonna hire somebody, which I actually think is what we've talked about doing.
We talked about doing
If this is a grant to hire them now, or an earmark to hire them now, what's our long-term funding? If we did hire somebody, the long-term funding source for this, I know part of it would, at least is potentially the community choice
Community choice
aggregation
aggregation,
program,
yep.
but that won't be a dominant part of it for sure.
We do not have a long-term solution. We're
Okay.
treating this as a pilot,
Okay,
as part of the facilities department, and then we would like to go through the year, determine, this works for us.
okay, so that
And
could
then determine.
quite possibly be, even if it's not even if it's not a contract with a company contract,
Could be a temporary.
it could be a contract with a
Yep.
particular person, with the understanding, we're looking for somebody who has a long-term interest, but we're trying to make sure we know what we're doing.
Yeah,
That's
Correct.
a good thing.
wiser way to
Okay.
go.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, we good?
Yes,
All right, motion to authorize the town administrator to sign a Commonwealth standard contract accepting a $50,000 earmark for a sustainability coordinator.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Vote to sign Green Communities Annual Report.
Just want to point out a couple of things. Susan McPhee and Amy Colleran worked on the Green Communities Annual Report, although I think Frank had a big role in getting that done quickly this year. Susan had sent us a message and wanted to let us know that the energy usage, we're down 27.5% from our baseline this year, which is fantastic.
Yeah, wow.
And the Blake fiscal year '23 energy use is down 30% versus last year, and that's due to both the new boiler and the heat pump hot water. So really moved the needle on both of those this year.
So did I miss the report? Did we have that?
It should have been in there, was
I
it
don't
not
think,
in there?
yeah, it wasn't
Oh,
in there.
Oh,
Um,
well, it's really great. You can see it because it's in an
Well, it's fine,
awesome
like, when I saw it added to
I'm
the
sorry.
updated, I'm like, okay, I'm not sure, did I miss it
We can
another
give you
bit?
a copy of it to
Yeah.
review tonight. It's in a new format, so you don't have that big giant spreadsheet anymore.
Oh, I like that
It's-
spreadsheet.
I know you do.
and it's only Pete that has to sign it
It's
as the
only
chair?
authorizing Pete to sign it.
So, Eileen, for your benefit, the first year I was chair, this came up just the same way this thing came up, except there was a cover letter that I was supposed to sign as chair. And I said, I don't sign things that say I approve or endorse this thing if I haven't read it. And they needed it like by Thursday. So I wound up reading, I basically said, I'll sign it, but I want to read the annual Green Communities Report. Pete, you're probably familiar enough with stuff because of the work you're doing with the Energy Committee. You might not have been such a stickler, but basically I wanted to read the report. And I was actually really blown away by the things that the town had done through the Energy Committee.
Good.
When I read that report. That would have been the 2018 report. But that spreadsheet, that Christine said, that spreadsheet was impressive. And you went down the columns and saw it was there. It's worth, independent of whether it needs to be read before Pete signs it, it is worth reading. So if you get it out to people.
Yeah, it's in a totally new format, so
Yeah.
you don't have to scroll through pages of
Yeah.
pages of pages.
Absolutely.
All right, so motion to approve the chair to sign the Green Communities Annual Report.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 15, vote to approve use of the following for the holiday stroll. A, gazebo to be used by the Medfield Music Association, 4 to 5 p.m. Townhouse,
4 to 5:30.
4 to 5:30, sorry. A townhouse front lawn for s'mores. Ooh.
Yes, Parks and Recreation is sponsoring s'mores on the front lawn of the town hall. Chief Perico has okayed this.
This is an open pit fire.
Yeah.
You can rest.
You're gonna be far away,
I know,
don't
that's
worry
why-
about it.
That's how this slipped through, because I won't be here.
Can put it in the water fountain. The water
Yeah,
fountain
you
doesn't
could.
work anyway.
That horse,
All right, so we'll vote to approve the use of the
Yeah,
following.
but, one just quick
Oh, sorry.
question. At one point, Gene was Minio was trying to get a hold of the gazebo. I assume that idea of doing something
Yeah.
for Belforge went away, and that's okay, good.
Yep,
All set.
in fact, the Music Association contacted her to use the gazebo, and she set them up, so.
Okay.
Motion to approve the use of the following for the holiday stroll. Gazebo to be used by the Medfield Music Association, 4 to 5:30 p.m., and the townhouse front lawn for s'mores.
Second.
all those in favor? Aye, aye. Number 16, vote to sign the contractor authorized signatory to receive the state earmark for Metacomet Park improvements.
So this was an additional earmark that we received from the legislature, and this is $100,000 for lighting improvements at Metacomet and $20,000 for overall and keeping it to the ports.
Good.
And I'm accepting that on behalf of Parks and Recreation.
Is the lighting for the tennis courts, or?
Looking for the tennis courts, yes.
All right, so this is for you to sign?
Yes.
Okay, so, motion to authorize the town administrator to sign the contract authorized signature to receive the state earmark for Medicom park improvements?
Oh,
No, so so this is the one where
This is the one that's.
Pete has to sign that you are able to sign. Yeah, it's,
All right, so re-motion that. So motion to authorize the chair to sign, and then is Christine doing the cosign, or?
No, you're authorizing the chair to authorize me.
Oh, okay, all right, sorry. Motion to authorize the chair to authorize the town administrator to sign the contract authorized signature to receive the state earmark for
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
Medicom state
Unbelievable.
improvement. 100K for lighting
I
and
don't know why this one had to
20K
be
for.
different than all of the others.
Ha.
I don't know why.
It has
Okay.
something to do with the select board, needs to handle the higher-end recreational facilities in the town. Second,
All those in favor? Aye, aye. Number 17, vote to authorize the town administrator to sign a fixed-rate electricity rate contract with Constellation Energy for the water treatment plant.
So last year, I know, I made a lot of jokes about Michael, Frank, and I becoming energy traders, and you updated, and authorized us to sign energy contract for our municipal buildings. We could not include the water treatment plant, the new one, because it was under construction. So we had to wait for the construction to be completed, and now we're entering into a contract, which will start in December 23 for that building. So, our current Eversource rate is going to, 0.15899, and the rate that we got for the water treatment plant, is 0.1117.
so we have, do we have one municipal building contract, and this will be a second contract?
This is the second
Do they
contract.
eventually merge, is the
Eventually,
intention?
yeah, when they'll time up hopefully at their expiration date, and we'll merge them into one, but no,
Okay.
we tried very hard to get this included, but they wanted, construction to be complete first.
That makes sense.
Sounds
No,
like
it
we just made it.
We good?
We're good.
All right, motion to authorize the town administrator to sign a fixed-rate electricity rate contract with Constellation Energy for the water treatment plant.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Citizens' comments? Seeing none. Consent agenda? None. Meeting minutes, February 7. Has everybody looked at
Good with
those?
minor wordsmithing, like editorial, mechanical.
Yeah, same here.
edits, so
I
I'm fine.
submitted mine a couple weeks ago.
Do we have a motion to approve them then?
All right, motion to approve the meeting minutes for February 7th, 2023.
Second.
All in favor? Aye, aye. Town administrator updates. Chris?
Just a few, just want to thank Isabel Marset. Her art installation is up on the rail trail and looks absolutely fantastic.
I'm so happy for her. That's
I know,
awesome.
I'm so happy. It looks great up there. Just a reminder, the warrant will close on January 9th. And if anybody is anticipating on submitting a citizen's petition, feel free to come in, meet with Brittany, Frank, or I. We can walk you through the process and help guide that. And then I will be out of the country, so I'm leaving you in good hands for the next meeting. And I'll see you when I get back.
Have a good trip.
That's you.
Don't get taken hostage anywhere.
Oh, thanks, Mark. I wasn't nervous about flying, so that's awesome.
Gus, report.
Pretty quiet couple of weeks to the holiday. Had a nice Thanksgiving. The one thing that I did that's town-related was attended the interfaith service that took place on Tuesday night. Well, it was pretty well attended. Good, religious leaders from both town and actually Westwood were here. It was nice. It was just a nice. Not sure if people haven't ever done that. We haven't done it in a couple of years, but it's a nice thing. It usually rotates around the different churches on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. So it was a nice event. And that was it.
Eileen?
I definitely have not been very mobile. I had my knee surgery right after our last meeting, so I will be slowly walking in the parade this coming Saturday. But I did forward on to you, Christine, and to Marion, the email from the neighbor that I met Thanksgiving morning that had moved to town just recently, like about 3 years ago. And I actually said, there is a town moderator slot open. Have we heard anything? Is it any rumblings on a town moderator, or are we? No, we'll find out when people start pulling papers.
Papers are mid-December.
All right. And then other than, yeah, I look forward to the tree lighting on Friday night, and then hopefully the parade won't be as kind of crazy as it was last year. Nobody will be cutting off the little Girl Scouts. So that'd be that.
Okay, thank you. I had a Medfield Foundation Legacy Fund meeting, and I also had a request from State Senator Becca Roush to have a conversation, so I had a conversation with her and brought her up to date and made some requests for Medfield, and that's it from me. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Oh,
Not myself.
Just in passing, Scott was perfectly happy with running for office annually, but most towns, it's a 3-year term, so that may be something you wanna
charter
look at,
change.
because it's really a pain in the neck to have to go out and get the signatures and do that all every
Yeah.
year.
That's funny, I was thinking the same thing. So, so that's not something we can
It's
change
a
this
minor
year?
charter change. It would take a town meeting action followed by a ballot question the following
Okay,
year.
so could we put that for this year's?
For town meeting, you could.
What is
What?
that?
Well, you can't do it.
It wouldn't be for this year anyway.
You would be able to do it. I would suggest we don't act on it until we let the nominations, I mean, I think it's a good idea. I personally, I think that would be one reason I wouldn't ever want to be the town moderators.
Every
You have to
year.
prove every
He
year
was
that you
okay
still
with
have
it,
50
but,
friends left in town.
He was okay with it, but my experience in Medway, if that were the case, I wouldn't have done it.
You like the idea of 3, instead of having to go every year?
Yeah, yeah.
I definitely, okay, I don't disagree with that. Okay. All right, motion to adjourn?
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
thanks.
Picked up an hour.